Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman was born March 20th, 1977. He is a former military. Chris Coleman met his future wife Sherry while he was serving in the Marine Corps, and she was in the United States Air Force. For Sherry, it was love at first sight. She immediately knew Chris was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Just a few months later, Sherry became pregnant with their first child, Garrett. Both devout Christians, Chris and Sherry decided to get married before Garrett was born. Chris called his father, Ronald Coleman, to tell him about the marriage and the upcoming baby. Although surprised, Ronald was delighted to learn that Sherry was pregnant. After Garrett was born, Chris and Sherry quickly had a second son, Gavin. Gavin had an energetic personality, while Garrett was calmer, like his father Chris. Both boys were happy and well-behaved. Sherry loved her sons dearly and was protective of them. Chris was a wonderful father, and they built a happy family. The family often laughed, played together, and cherished every moment with their sons. After leaving the military, the Coleman family moved to Waterloo, Illinois, a small town. They lived in an upscale neighborhood thanks to Chris's new job. He became the director of security for Joyce Meyer, a famous televangelist and CEO of one of the largest Christian evangelical ministries in the world. However, Joyce Meyer's multi-million-dollar income and lavish lifestyle caused controversy. Some critics claimed that she was a greedy con artist who preyed on the fears of her followers. They argued that her wealth and lavish lifestyle contradicted the religious teachings she preached. Chris was Joyce's personal bodyguard and protector. His main job was to monitor and prevent hate mail and threats sent to Joyce's church. These letters often threatened Joyce's life, with the sender claiming to find and harm her. Joyce's ministry, based in St. Louis, Missouri, hired Chris as a bodyguard. The job paid him $100,000 a year, providing financial stability for his family. In addition to his security duties, Chris often accompanied Joyce on international trips. He was always by her side to ensure her safety. However, this meant that Chris was away from home for long periods of time. According to Sherry, one year Chris worked for Joyce and was away for 260 days. This was stressful for her because her two sons, Garrett and Gavin, missed their father very much. The boys did not like it when their father was away and would mark the days on their calendars to count down the days until he returned. They kept looking at the calendar, eagerly awaiting the day he would return. When Chris returned home, he was away again shortly thereafter. Chris's frequent absences caused a lot of stress in his marriage to Sherry. Sherry was tired of doing everything by herself, playing both mother and father. She felt overwhelmed and underappreciated. This continued to have a negative impact on their relationship. In October 2008, Chris visited Tampa, Florida, where Sherry had attended high school. Before the trip, Sherry contacted her old friend Tara Lintz and asked her to look after Chris while he was in town. After arriving and settling in, Chris reached out to Tara. They decided to meet up, and Tara enthusiastically showed Chris around Tampa. At around 11 p.m. on November 14, 2008, Chris received a disturbing email. The email was sent from destroychris@gmail.com, and the subject and content were alarming. The letter demanded that Chris stop working for Joyce Meyer, or he and his family would be killed. In the following days, several similar threatening emails were sent from the same address, repeating the threat and giving specific times when his family would be attacked. Notably, the sender of these emails seemed to know Chris's schedule, even his travel plans abroad. Chris informed Sherry of the threatening emails he had received and reported them to the local police the following Monday. He explained that he was often away from home due to his work with Joyce Meyer. The police offered to patrol the area while Chris was away. Despite the increased police patrols, Sherry remained concerned about her family's safety. She invited a friend to stay with her while Chris was away because she felt unsafe being home alone. Sherry emphasized that she was serious about protecting her family and would do whatever it took. To prove her seriousness, Sherry revealed to her friend that she had a gun. She even gave instructions on how to use the gun in case someone broke into the house while she was away. 2 months after the Coleman family began receiving the death threats, a mysterious letter appeared in their mailbox. The letter was delivered directly to them, with no identifying mark on the sender. The message was written in bold letters. The letter contains that, "Renounce your God in public, or there will be no more chances. Time is running out for you and your family." The threat was serious and clear. It showed that if the Coleman family did not comply, they would face dangerous consequences. Sherry was extremely frightened when she received this threatening message. The invasion of her private space and the direct threat to herself and her family made her feel extremely anxious throughout the following period. Sherry's fear increased, as the letter served as a warning of the danger lurking around. After receiving the death threat, Chris and Sherry Coleman decided to increase security measures to protect their family. In an effort to protect their family, Chris installed security cameras around the house. These cameras recorded continuously and streamed live to a monitor in the basement office. The footage was stored on a digital recorder, creating a permanent record. Chris hoped that this system would help him identify the person threatening his family. After Chris installed security cameras outside the house, the threats against the Coleman family stopped. Life for Chris, Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin gradually returned to normal. By April 2009, things had improved dramatically. Sherry told everyone that she felt her marriage was better and was determined to keep it that way. She expressed relief that the death threats had stopped and that she was happy with her life. Her hopes were quickly dashed when a new letter arrived at the Coleman home. This time, the content of the letter was more serious, warning that the worst was about to happen to her. Sherry's husband, Chris, was concerned about the contents of the letter. He decided to check the security camera footage from the night before. To his surprise, he spotted a suspicious figure in the footage, but could not identify the person. This new incident once again raised Sherry's fears and concerns about the safety of her and her children. She lived in constant fear of what might happen. The sense of security she had felt when the threats had subsided was gone. Now, Sherry felt as if her worst nightmare was about to come true. Local police stepped up their efforts to protect the Coleman family from the increasingly serious threats. Justin Barlow, a detective sergeant with the nearby Columbia City Police Department and a neighbor of the Coleman family, took a special interest in the case. Detective Justin took the initiative to call Chris Coleman. During the call, Justin said he had noticed that Chris was often away from home for work. The detective offered his assistance and provided his cell phone number so that Chris could contact him if he needed help or had any concerns. Detective Justin Barlow lived across the street from the Colemans and had installed a surveillance camera at their entrance. He assured Chris Coleman that he could respond faster than the police in an emergency because he lived nearby. For weeks, Justin's camera recorded the Colemans as they went about their daily routines, but failed to detect who had left the death threat. Despite Detective Justin's efforts to investigate, the videos provided no clues or information about the sender of the mysterious messages. On the morning of May 5, 2009, Chris arrived at the gym at 5:45. About an hour after leaving the gym, he called home to check on Sherry and her sons who were awake and ready for school. However, no one answered. Chris called his neighbor, Detective Justin Barlow. At 6:45 a.m. Detective Justin prepared the necessary items such as weapons, handcuffs, flashlights, and radios before going to the Coleman house. While waiting for backup from another unit, he decided to contact Sherry to check on the situation. With a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, Detective Justin approached the Coleman house and knocked loudly, hoping someone would answer. When he arrived, Detective Justin felt uneasy by the suspicious silence that pervaded the house. The lights were off and there was no sign of movement inside, which only added to his anxiety. A few minutes later, a police cruiser arrived to assist. One officer was assigned to check the back of the house, trying to look through the windows or back door for any sign of Sherry and the boys. They discovered signs of forced entry into the basement. This discovery made Detective Justin concerned for the safety of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, as there might be someone in danger inside the house. They decided to enter the Coleman home through the basement to investigate. When the officers announced their presence, no one answered. They conducted a thorough search of the basement and discovered a disconnected video cable at the computer desk. This led them to the conclusion that the security camera's video recorder had been removed. They left the basement and went up the stairs of the Coleman home. As they moved, they began to smell a strong odor of spray paint. The odor became stronger as they approached the main floor of the home. When they reached the upper floor, they found the walls spray painted with several offensive messages directed at Chris and Sherry's family. 13 minutes after the call ended, Chris returned home from the gym. Detective Justin asked Chris to stand outside while they searched the home. Chris complied, not asking questions or trying to get in, but just sitting quietly on the porch. Shortly thereafter, a third officer arrived. All three officers were aware of the urgent task of searching the remaining rooms of the house for Sherry and the boys. Upon reaching the second floor of the Coleman home, Detective Justin entered the bedroom of Garrett, the eldest son in the family. Initially, Garrett appeared to be sleeping. However, after a closer examination, the detective discovered that Garrett was dead. His body showed no signs of life and was cold. There were strangulation marks on Garrett's neck, indicating that he had been murdered. The detective was shocked to find Garrett's lifeless body. In the next room, another officer checked Gavin and was horrified to find that the boy was also dead. Both brothers had signs of strangulation. The killer also left an obscene message painted on the bed sheets, adding to the horror of the scene. Meanwhile, an officer entered the master bedroom and witnessed a horrifying scene. Sherry was lying motionless on the bed, dead like her sons. Her hair obscured her face. The police determined that Sherry had been murdered. When they examined the room, they found numerous bruises on Sherry's body. These injuries indicated that she had fought back, defended herself, and tried to protect her sons before she was killed. Detective Justin and the officers had just discovered the bodies of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin. At that time, Chris was waiting outside, hoping to hear news about his family. Detective Justin was forced to inform Chris of the heartbreaking news that his entire family had been murdered. Hearing the news, Chris was completely devastated and extremely distressed by this unbearable news. Detective Justin took Chris aside to give him some privacy to process the information he had just received. As the situation took in, Chris had a very strong reaction. He felt nauseous and his body felt like it was collapsing. Chris curled up into a ball, unable to control his emotions. He was completely overwhelmed by the shock and could not believe that his family had been kidnapped in such a brutal way. In a moment of desperation, Chris tried his best to contact his father, Ronald. He called and informed him that something had happened to Sherry and the boys. As soon as he received the news, Ronald realized that Chris was in a state of shock. He could not believe that such a tragedy had happened to his family. News of the gruesome murders involving Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin quickly spread throughout the Waterloo, Illinois community where the Coleman family lived. When the neighbors woke up to hear the terrible news, they were all devastated and confused. The Coleman family was once considered a model American family, with two sons, Garrett and Gavin, who were cute and loved by everyone. A neighbor shared that everyone wished their children were like Garrett and Gavin because they were always polite and kind-hearted. Sherry's family could not accept the brutality of this murder. After discovering his wife and 2 sons murdered, Chris was taken to a nearby police station for questioning. Justin asked Chris to explain the case. Chris expressed deep remorse for leaving Sherry and the children home alone while he went to exercise. During an interview with Justin, Chris claimed that he did not know who might have killed his family. However, the detective noticed some suspicious points in Chris's behavior. Most notably, Chris did not ask about how his wife and sons were murdered. This lack of interest struck the detective as odd, especially given the severity of the case. It suggested that Chris may not really want to know the details of his family's deaths. During the interview, Justin noticed that Chris tried to hide the scratches on his arms. Despite the warmth of the room, Chris asked for a blanket to cover the wound. This alarmed Justin, as he knew that Chris's wife, Sherry, had put up a fight before she was murdered. When the detective asked about the source of the scratches, Chris explained that he had gotten the scratches while installing a satellite dish the day before. During his interview with detectives at the police station, Chris adamantly denied having an affair. However, he did admit to having a close friend, Tara Lintz, a Florida cocktail bartender and high school classmate of his wife's. Chris admitted that his wife would not approve of them talking to each other. However, he insisted that he had no intention of leaving his wife for Tara and said he would never betray his family like that. The investigation took a turn when a detective contacted Tara in Florida. Tara revealed that she and Chris were not just friends, but had been having an extramarital affair since November 2008. She provided police with her cell phone and laptop, which contained evidence such as emails, intimate photos, and videos that she and Chris exchanged during the relationship. When confronted with this information, Chris admitted that he saw Tara more often than he had initially told detectives. A detailed investigation revealed that Chris and Tara had a secret plan to meet at places where Chris worked for Joyce Meyer. They often chose exotic locations such as Hawaii to have private time away from their families. Chris argued that his relationship with Tara was not an affair, as he believed that an affair required a deeper commitment. However, detectives found important information on Tara's phone and computer. She had a calendar with her wedding date and planned vacations, suggesting that she believed Chris would leave his family for her. This evidence made detectives skeptical of Chris's testimony, as it contradicted his claim that their relationship was not serious. Chris's father, Ronald, was shocked to learn that his son was having an affair with Tara. However, he insisted that the relationship had nothing to do with the murder of Chris's wife and son. Ronald described Chris as a gentle, quiet person with no violent tendencies. He believed his son could not have committed such a serious crime. Although detectives believed that Chris' relationship with Tara could have been a motive for the murder, the initial investigation did not find enough evidence to charge him. As a result, after 6 hours of questioning, Chris was allowed to leave the police station without being charged. Tara was linked to the murders of Sherry, Garrett and Gavin Coleman, but was later ruled out as a suspect when police confirmed that she was in Florida at the time of the family's murder on May 5, 2009. The case led to the largest investigation in Illinois history. A task force of 25 detectives was established, working 20 hours a day for 15 days with the assistance of specialists. The main focus of the investigation was to trace the source of the threatening emails sent to Chris Coleman. Police scrutinized every threatening email Joyce Meyer Ministries had received over the past year, investigating across the country. All of the people who sent emails to the Joyce Meyer Ministry were tracked down and questioned, but none of them were linked to Coleman's murder. A team of computer experts was called in to investigate the Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin murders. Detectives sought their help in the hopes of finding digital evidence of the crimes. The team began by analyzing the diaris@gmail.com email account. During their investigation, they discovered that the email address had been created on November 14th. 2008, just days before the first email was sent. A shocking discovery was that the death threats sent to Chris Coleman's family actually came from Chris's own IP address. Investigators continued to investigate by carefully analyzing the spray paint at the scene and Christopher Coleman's handwriting. They took photos of the spray paint and collected samples of Christopher Coleman's handwriting as evidence. These samples were sent to a handwriting expert. After comparing them, the expert concluded that the handwriting matched the spray paint. From there, investigators determined that Christopher Coleman was the person who wrote the words on the wall of his home on the day of the murder. Chemical analysis revealed that the spray paint at the crime scene was Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red. A detective contacted the manager of the spray paint store after learning that Chris Coleman had made a purchase there a few days before his family was murdered. The manager confirmed that Chris had purchased the same Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red spray paint. This finding was significant because it linked Chris Coleman to the paint used at the crime scene. The time of death played a key role in the investigation. Chris initially told police that he left home at 5:45 a.m. on May 5, 2009, the morning his family was murdered. However, an autopsy revealed that Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin were killed around 3 a.m. This indicated that Chris was still home when his family was murdered, contradicting his initial statement. 2 weeks after the bodies were discovered, Chris was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that Chris was motivated by greed, selfishness, and narcissism. It appeared that Chris wanted to start a new life, and his family became an obstacle. In April 2011, Chris was put on trial for the murders of his wife Sherry and sons Garrett and Gavin. Prosecutors told the jury that Chris killed his family because he wanted to be with his lover, Tara Lintz. However, he could not divorce Sherry because he feared losing his high-paying job at Joyce Meyer Ministries, an organization that did not accept divorces. During the trial, Chris's defense attorney argued that his client was innocent of the family murders. They alleged that an intruder entered the home and killed the family on May 5, 2009. However, 2 years after the murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, Chris was convicted of murder. The judge sentenced Chris to life in prison without parole, rather than the death penalty. This decision was made because the state of Illinois had abolished the death penalty, which was expected to take effect just months after the case. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Maria Luisa Cedeno. On July 18, 2020, Maria Luisa Cedeno checked into the Lamb Mission Inn Hotel in Manuel Antonio, located in the Punta Arenas province of Costa Rica. She was accompanied by her pet dog, Mofelda, a small dog that she treated like her daughter. On her first day, everything seemed normal. Maria Luisa spent time at the beach, enjoyed lunch at a restaurant, and had some drinks. At 4:30 p.m., Maria Luisa requested a bottle of wine, a bottle of mineral water, and 2 glasses to be brought to her room. Throughout the afternoon and evening, there was no activity from her room. On July 20th, hotel staff attempted to contact Maria Luisa but received no response. A staff member had spoken to Maria Luisa, and Maria Luisa mentioned that she was living alone after ending her relationship with her boyfriend. She expressed that she was not feeling well and was traveling with only her small dog, Mofelda. She also shared that the ongoing pandemic, which had begun several months earlier, was taking a toll on her mental health. Given the difficulties she had faced in her life, she felt she needed a vacation. The hotel staff decided to conduct a routine room check. They found the front door locked from the inside, so they opted to check the patio door instead. This door was an emergency exit for guests with pets, allowing dogs to go outside. As they approached this exit, they found it was only partially open. When they entered, they smelled a terrible smell and saw blood stains scattered all over the room. In one corner, they found a dog alive but shaking with fear. On the bed, they discovered Maria Luisa's body wrapped in a sheet. Maria Luisa is a respected anesthesiologist. At the age of 43, she is the head of the Department of Anesthesiology and Rehabilitation at Cima Hospital in Escazú. Maria Luisa is highly respected by her colleagues, and she is always ready to assist whenever someone needs help. Maria Luisa's parents lived in the town of San Carlos. Friends described her as a strong, intelligent, and likable woman who loved to travel. Upon receiving the news of Maria Luisa's death, her family was deeply saddened. The mystery surrounding this case began the moment the staff discovered Maria Luisa's body. The crime scene was gruesome and brutal. After discovering the body, the hotel staff contacted the police. Upon arriving and examining the scene, the police quickly determined that Maria Luisa had been murdered. Maria Luisa's body was severely damaged and tortured. Forensic experts then arrived to collect evidence, determine the cause of death, and analyze every detail to identify the perpetrator. A subsequent autopsy discovered multiple bite marks on the body and 2 broken fingernails, indicating that Maria Luisa had fought back. The autopsy also revealed that the killer had washed the body, suggesting that he had taken Maria Luisa to the bathroom after the murder. Police determined that Maria Luisa had been murdered in the bedroom, as evidenced by the large amount of blood found there. The perpetrator then took the body into the bathroom, washed it, dried it, wrapped it in a sheet, and placed it on the bed. The killer had washed the body, possibly to eliminate evidence and hide signs of the crime. However, this effort was largely ineffective because blood was found everywhere, on the floor, walls, curtains, and bed. This brutality suggested that the attack was exceptionally violent. Experts took photographs and gathered as much physical evidence as they could. The body was sent for an autopsy, and the police started questioning hotel staff and guests who might have witnessed or heard anything. At the scene, it appeared that Maria Luisa was screaming loudly and her dog was barking. However, no one reported hearing any screams throughout the night, despite the hotel being mostly empty due to the pandemic. Only a few staff were present, and the hotel owner, Harry Bowden, lived there with his husband. Harry Bowden also let some friends live in the hotel because they were having financial problems, as the hotel was never fully booked during the pandemic. In Maria Luisa's room, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses ordered through room service were discovered. An inspection of her cell phone later revealed that she had sent a picture of the 2 glasses to a friend, but she did not mention being with anyone or waiting for someone in her room. When police interviewed Maria Luisa's friends and family to check for any enemies, they discovered that Maria Luisa always ordered 2 glasses, even when she was alone. She would pour alcohol into one glass and water into the other, indicating that she was by herself and not waiting for anyone. Police believe the attacker may have been someone who saw Maria Luisa at the hotel, noticed the back door open and took the opportunity to attack. However, the brutality of the case suggests that the killer must have had a deep hatred for Maria Luisa to have attacked her like that. This has left the police baffled. In this case, it appears that this was a murder committed by someone who knew Maria Luisa and intended to kill her. However, there is no evidence that Maria Luisa was with anyone or that she was seeing anyone. The autopsy results further revealed that Maria Luisa had been abused. She had signs of strangulation and marks on her cheeks, lips, arms, and chest. Since Maria Luisa did not scream, the police suspect that there were several people attacking her, rather than one person. Police believe that 2 people held Maria Luisa down while a 3rd person raped her. An analysis of Maria Luisa's body found no evidence of rope or restraints. Police also speculated that the attackers may have gagged Maria Luisa by stuffing something into her mouth, allowing them to carry out the attack undetected. It didn't take long for police to find their first suspect, a man who was staying at the hotel with several fresh injuries that looked like scrapes and bruises. The man was Herrera, who worked at a nightclub in the city and was staying at the hotel at the time of the murder. Herrera was arrested. His footprints were compared to those found at the murder scene, and two of them matched Herrera's footprints, which were found on the porcelain floor in front of the bed in the bedroom. A second suspect, Luis Carlos Miranda, was arrested after a hotel security guard reported seeing him walking the hallways at night with suspect Herrera. After Herrera was taken into custody, Luis Carlos Miranda was questioned to determine if he was connected to the case. Dental tests were conducted, which revealed his dental records matched the bite marks found on Maria Luisa's body. Hotel staff reported that they saw Maria Luisa meet with Luis Carlos Miranda and Herrera on a few occasions, but these encounters were casual, with no indication that they knew each other well. They simply greeted each other and exchanged pleasantries. This casual interaction may have been due to the small number of guests in the hotel at the time. Two friends, Luis Carlos Miranda and Herrera, were staying at the hotel due to financial difficulties during the pandemic. The hotel owner, Harry Bowden, had allowed them to live on his property. When the police discovered matching footprints and bite marks that implicated Luis Carlos Miranda and Herrera, they brought Harry Bowden in for questioning. During questioning, Harry Bowden shared that he and his husband had dinner with Luis Carlos Miranda and Herrera on the night of July 19, 2020. After dinner, the four men went to a private pool area. Harry Bowden explained that in exchange for their stay at the hotel, Luis Carlos Miranda worked on the hotel's marketing website, while Herrera worked as a chef and bartender. Harry Bowden and the suspects Herrera and Miranda were acquaintances and became friends over time. About a year before the murder, they began living in the hotel and began spending more time together, eating out and socializing. Meeting up led to a friendship between the four men. However, during the investigation, in August 2020, Harry Bowden cooperated with the police and gave an interview, but he was later arrested. Because his dental records matched two bite marks on Maria Luisa's body, police continued to seize the phones of all the arrested suspects and found compromising text messages between Luis Carlos Miranda and Harry Bowden. These messages, sent a few days before the incident, had Miranda inviting hotel owner Harry Bowden to have an intimate relationship with a woman while Miranda was watching the woman. Textual evidence combined with physical evidence led police to arrest three suspects to build a case. Harry Bowden's husband was the only suspect not arrested due to lack of evidence, including no matching fingerprints, text messages, or bite marks on Maria Luisa's body. The prosecution charged Harry Bowden, Teodoro Herrera, and Luis Carlos Miranda with the murder of Maria Luisa Cedeno. The defense team for the suspects argued that the bite mark evidence was inconclusive, suggesting none of them were involved. Before the trial, Harry Bowden's lawyer asked for house arrest, citing two reasons. First, the country's pandemic posed a danger to Harry Bowden, who is 69 years old. Second, he had just undergone knee surgery and had difficulty walking, often relying on a cane. As a result, the court approved the house arrest order, allowing Harry Bowden to return to the hotel. Although confined to the hotel grounds, he still enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, complete with servants, restaurants, and swimming pools. On September 13, 2022, the public trial of Harry Bowden, Teodoro Herrera, and Luis Carlos Miranda began, where text message evidence and dental records were presented. At that time, the prosecution had difficulty proving the involvement of Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda. Although text messages were found and bite marks were allegedly found on Maria Luisa's body, the bite marks could not prove who committed the murder. On the contrary, there was a large amount of evidence against Teodoro Herrera. A bloodstain was found, and he had superficial injuries. Furthermore, his blood was found under Maria Luisa's fingernails and on several personal items, such as a watch and a cell phone, which were in Teodoro Herrera's room at the time of the search. As a result of the trial, Teodoro Herrera was sentenced to 50 years in prison for murder and rape. In contrast, Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda were declared innocent due to insufficient physical evidence linking them to the crimes. Although the case was resolved, Maria Luisa Cedino's family, satisfied with Teodoro Herrera's verdict, was not satisfied with the acquittal of Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Marta del Castillo. Marta del Castillo was born on June 19, 1991, in Seville, Spain, to parents Eva Casanova and Antonio del Castillo. At the age of 17, Marta was a normal high school student like everyone else. Then her life changed completely. On January 24, 2009, Marta was in the middle of a conversation with her best friend, Sylvia Fernandez. She abruptly ended the conversation, explaining that she had to leave quickly because her boyfriend, Miguel Carcano, was waiting for her downstairs. Marta told Sylvia that she needed to talk to Miguel to clear up some issues in their relationship and promised to fill her in on everything when she returned. Marta ran into her father in the hallway and he advised her against getting on Miguel's motorcycle. In response, Marta just gave her father a light kiss on the cheek. She left her home at 5:30 p.m., and as the hours passed and she failed to return, her family started to worry. Marta's mother reached out to several people, and they all gave the same answer: Marta was probably with Miguel, who would likely know where she was. However, when they tried to contact Miguel, he didn't answer their calls. As a result, Marta's father decided to visit Miguel's house. Despite ringing the doorbell multiple times, no one answered the door. They eventually got in touch with Samuel Benitez, a close friend of Miguel's who claimed to have seen Marta that night. According to Samuel, Miguel dropped Marta off at his house at midnight, which was plausible considering it was only 11:45. Marta's family became more worried, and at 2 a.m. that morning, they reported her missing to the police. At that point, they had no idea that Marta's disappearance would become one of the most highly publicized cases in the country's history. 4 hours after Marta's disappearance was reported, the police identified Miguel Carcano, Marta's boyfriend, as a suspect. Despite this, a third report was filed at 1:30 p.m. But the authorities failed to take immediate action. The family grew increasingly frustrated with the delay. However, 17 hours after the initial request for help, the police initiated a search for Marta. As time went by, Marta's family took matters into their own hands and started collecting statements from Marta's relatives and friends. They also organized a press conference on January 27, 2009, and initiated a campaign to find her. A large protest took place in Seville the day after Marta's disappearance, with 2,000 people demanding her safe return under the slogan, "We are all Marta." A second demonstration on February 7 drew around 3,000 people, and the case received widespread media attention. After 21 days of searching, the police finally found Miguel Carcano on February 13. The 20-year-old confessed to Marta's murder and revealed that he had dumped her body into the Guave River near his apartment. However, he claimed he did not act alone and implicated Samuel Benitez as an accomplice in disposing of the body. Samuel accepted responsibility for his role in the crime. Further investigation led to the identification of additional accomplices, including Francisco Javier Garcia Marin, aka El Cuco, a troubled minor, Francisco Delgado, Carcano's brother, and Maria Garcia, Francisco Delgado's girlfriend. All 5 suspects were arrested and interrogated, but their statements were inconsistent. Meanwhile, a thorough search for Marta's body in the river began. On February 16, Miguel repeated his statement to a judge claiming he had only admitted to the crime due to police pressure and was not involved in Marta's murder. Miguel Carcano changed his testimony on March 18, claiming that he and El Cuco had violated Marta with a knife before strangling her. Hay then took Marta's body to Delgado's house and disposed of it in a garbage container. However, Marta's father accused Delgado's girlfriend, Maria Garcia, and theorized that Marta's body may have been destroyed, as Maria Garcia's father worked at a biological waste crematorium. Despite this theory gaining media attention, the police continued searching for Marta's body. On November 16, 2009, El Cuco was moved to a supervised apartment because he had exceeded the maximum time allowed for confinement. He was awaiting trial, which took place in February 2011. El Cuco was acquitted of abuse and murder charges due to insufficient evidence, but was sentenced to 2 years and 11 months in a juvenile detention center for covering up for Miguel. The trial for the 4 defendants Miguel, Samuel, Delgado, Maria Garcia involved in the case began on October 17, 2011. During the trial, Miguel Carcano admitted to hitting Marta with an ashtray during a heated argument, which led to her death. He also revealed that his previous statements about abusing Marta were false. The investigation revealed inconsistencies in the stories told by Delgado, Maria Garcia, and Samuel. They claimed to have no knowledge of Marta's whereabouts after her death. They alleged that Miguel fabricated the entire story to reduce his guilt. However, forensic analysis uncovered incriminating evidence. On November 22, 2011, the forensic police discovered traces of Marta's blood on Miguel's jacket. A mix of Miguel DNA and Maria Garcia's DNA was also found on a roll of fabric tape. Additionally, a DNA match from Delgado and Maria Garcia was detected on an extension cable, believed to have been used to strangle Marta. This was surprising, given the accused had consistently maintained they had only been at the crime scene early in the morning and had no knowledge of the incident. When confronted with the new evidence, Maria Garcia was accused of violating Marta's body in attempting to cover up the crime. A detailed analysis of the crime scene revealed up to 5 fingerprints on 3 alcohol bottles, with 1 belonging to El Cuco. As the investigation drew to a close, the 4 suspects were under intense scrutiny from the public. Their trials were heavily guarded by the police, and the prosecution presented a substantial case against Miguel, Samuel, Delgado, and Maria Garcia. The trial involved 90 witnesses, including national police officers and experts. The prosecution also presented 30,000 pH monitorings, crime scene photographs, DNA evidence, and other items found at the house on Leon 13. The trial sparked a massive public outcry, drawing large crowds that pushed against the police barrier. The public requested to view Marta's body and also wanted to catch a glimpse of Miguel, the accused. Despite Delgado and Maria Garcia attempting to conceal themselves with hats and sunglasses, however, they were still unable to escape the crowd's attention. A woman approached them, shouting insults, while others tried to remove their sunglasses and pushed them forward, forcing them to reveal their faces to the surrounding crowd. During the trial, El Cuco's mother gave an interview with her face covered, insisting on her son's innocence and stating that neither she nor El Cuco had any knowledge about Marta's body. Despite being labeled a liar by journalists, she received €10,000 for the interview. A key witness then came forward, a taxi driver who had given Delgado a ride on the night of the crime. The driver explained that he had been extra cautious with his passengers, as a colleague had been murdered recently. He recalled picking up a bald, bearded man matching Delgado's description, who had a plastic bag and stared at him intently. The driver stated that he dropped Delgado off on Leon's 13th Street, exactly where the crime took place, and charged him €8 for the ride. However, Delgado's defense lawyer questioned the driver's statement, pointing out that the fare for the 2-kilometer ride should have been €5, not €8, which cast doubt on the driver's testimony. Marta's parents took the stand and described the immense pain they were experiencing due to the situation. They had to quit their jobs, start taking psychiatric medication, and even develop depression. Their other 2 daughters, Marta's sisters, were also going through a terrible time. The jury's verdict in January 2012 did not bring the family the satisfaction they were hoping for. Miguel was the only person responsible for Marta's murder and was sentenced to 21 years and 3 months in prison. Additionally, he was banned from living in the city where Marta's family resides for the next 30 years. He to pay part of the trial costs and compensate Marta's parents with €280,000 for the moral damage caused by her murder and disappearance. Each of her sisters was also awarded €30,000. In contrast, Delgado and Samuel were released due to lack of evidence placing them at the crime scene at the time of the murder. However, the following year, they demanded that Marta's family pay for the trial costs, adding to the family's distress. Marta's father expressed his intention to seek justice beyond Spain's borders, as he believed the country's system was outdated. He even considered taking Marta's case to Strasbourg, home to the European Parliament and the European Court of Human Rights. In December 2011, Marta's mother wrote a heartfelt letter to Miguel, who was in prison at the time. She asks him to return Marta's body so they can end the long suffering they have endured. She longed to give Marta a proper burial, where she could visit her, bring flowers, and talk to her. Unfortunately, the letter went unanswered. On January 24, 2012, 3 years after Marta's disappearance, demonstrations took place in various Spanish cities and towns, demanding justice for the young girl. As a result, Miguel faced threats from fellow inmates and attempted to take his own life. He was then transferred to a specialized therapy unit where he had limited contact with the outside world, including no visitors or phone calls. During his imprisonment, Miguel created multiple versions of the crime, with as many as 7 different accounts. This led to several lawyers withdrawing from his case due to inconsistencies. In his latest testimony, presented in 2013, he implicated someone close to him as the perpetrator of the crime. Miguel described an argument between him and his brother, Delgado, over the mortgage for their house at Leon 13. The dispute began when Miguel sent a letter to the family stating that he no longer wanted to cover for Delgado. Miguel stated that a disagreement over a fraudulent loan led to a physical confrontation. The situation became violent and Delgado allegedly threatened his younger brother with a weapon. When Marta intervened, she was fatally struck with the butt of Delgado's gun. After the incident, Delgado made a phone call, but the recipient and the content of the conversation are unknown. Delgado then left the house, leaving Marta's lifeless body behind. El Cuco arrived, and Delgado asked for his help in disposing of the body. They used a wheelchair to transport the body to the Mahala farm in Laneda, where they buried Marta. At first, Marta's parents believed Miguel's story and were grateful to him for telling the truth. They requested that the investigation be reopened, this time focusing on Delgado. However, the prosecution and the judge did not find Marta's statements credible. Marta's father visited Miguel in prison, asking for his cooperation in finding Marta's body. In exchange for Miguel's help, Marta's father offered him a deal. Upon his release from prison, he would give Miguel the house located at Lawn 13, which he had previously purchased. The search for Marta's body became one of the most expensive in the country's history, involving extensive land and sea searches. It seemed impossible for Miguel, Samuel, and another person to transport Marta's body on a motorcycle without incident. During the reenactment, the body fell off the moment the engine started. After Miguel claimed that the body was thrown into a trash bin, the search shifted to the local landfill, which receives all the area's waste. In order to find any relevant clues, the search team estimated that they would need to remove approximately 40,000 tons of waste from the landfill due to the large amount of time that had passed since Marta's disappearance and the massive amount of waste at the landfill. The search for Marta's body lasted 32 days but was unsuccessful. Miguel, the accused, gave investigators 4 different locations where evidence might be found, leading to multiple new searches. However, the searches were hindered by a lack of funds, and at one point, the then Interior Minister Alfredo Perez had to pause the search due to financial constraints. In April 2013, Miguel pointed to Delgado as the real murderer and provided another location where Marta's body could be found, this time near the city of Lake, Canada. Despite having lost credibility due to his previous false versions, a new search was conducted. Miguel went with the police to the area and gave them a general idea of where he claimed to have buried Marta's body in 2009, along with Delgado. The police excavated the soil of 6 farms, focusing on areas with recent earth movements. A total area of 10,000 square meters was scanned, but unfortunately, nothing was found. All the searches were unsuccessful, and at the request of Marta's parents. The search was halted until 2015. The public ministry requested that the defendants compensate the Ministry of the Interior for the costs incurred during the search, amounting to $66,329. In a new development, an individual named Oscar, who claimed to be a criminal, approached El Cuco's, Rosalia mother, and pretended to seek a confession. However, his actual intention was to infiltrate and secretly gather information. Over time, Oscar and Rosalia developed a close relationship, meeting every 2 or 3 days and speaking daily on the phone. Rosalia trusted Oscar enough to give him the keys to her house, and they shared secrets and took long walks on the beach together. He gained her trust and affection. Oscar even convinced Rosalia that they would leave the country together once her son's, El Cuco situation was resolved. Meanwhile, Oscar secretly recorded 600 hours of conversations between Rosalia and those around her over a period of 2.5 years. In October 2011, El Cuco was granted temporary release from the juvenile center, where he was being held for covering up for Miguel. During one conversation, Oscar asked El Cuco if he thought the police were following him. El Cuco replied that were, and that the police were trying to find out where they had hidden Marta. This statement incriminated El Cuco and revealed his involvement in Marta's disappearance. Realizing his mistake, El Cuco quickly tried to retract his statement, claiming he had done nothing wrong. Oscar played along as if he hadn't noticed. However, in other recordings, El Cuco made fun of the police's efforts to find the body, and Rosalia criticized the investigators for not examining her phone records closely. Although Oscar worked diligently to record conversations, the 600 hours of recorded material was not presented as evidence in court. It wasn't until 13 years after Marta's disappearance, in 2022, that the recordings led to results. On May 26, 2022, a large crowd of mostly neighbors from Marta's family gathered outside the courthouse to demonstrate their support for a new trial. Rosalia and El Cuco arrived at the courthouse, protected by police. El Cuco was fully covered, wearing a hoodie, sunglasses, gloves, and a mask. Rosalia wore sunglasses, a mask, and a headscarf. In 2011, El Cuco claimed he wasn't at the scene of the crime on Lyon 13th Street. El Cuco said he had gone home around 11:30 p.m. with friends and met his mother's partner, Oscar, who was taking out the trash. Oscar then went upstairs to his apartment and stayed there for the rest of the night. Rosalia claimed she had gone out for drinks with Oscar around 11:30 p.m. and returned home around 1:30 a.m. on January 25th, finding her son asleep. El Cuco admitted that on January 24th, Miguel contacted him for assistance after killing Marta. Miguel requested his help in burying Marta's body, along with Samuel. They used Rosalia's vehicle to travel to Lyon 13, where Delgado is also there. During this time, Rosalia, El Cuco's mother, stayed at a bar until 4:30 in the morning. Upon returning home, she found her son missing. In the end, El Cuco and Rosalia were charged with perjury for hindering prosecution. As a result, El Cuco and Rosalia were sentenced to 2.5 years in prison on June 9, 2022. The judge also imposed a fine of €1,144 on each of them, as well as ordering them to pay €30,000 in civil liability to Marta's parents. Despite the sentencing and fines, Marta's parents were more concerned with finding their daughter's body than seeking monetary compensation. In the same year, the investigative judge allowed an expert to access the mobile phones of Miguel and Marta. Notably, Miguel gave his consent for his phone to be examined, believing it would reveal evidence pointing to Delgado as the actual perpetrator. The primary objective of the investigation was to locate Marta's body, which remained missing. 13 years after Marta's murder, the civil court decided to close the investigation into the search for her body in November 2022. The court declared the investigation period had expired because no new significant evidence had been found. Marta's parents eventually accepted that Miguel would never disclose the location of their daughter's body. Hey everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Kate Waring. Kate Waring was born in Charleston, South Carolina, USA. She grew up in a loving family with 2 siblings, and her parents always tried their best to give their children the best life possible. As a child, Kate showed a deep love and compassion for animals, which led her to start volunteering at various animal shelters at a young age. As a teenager, she was a dancer and had a wide social circle, known for her positive attitude and outlook on life. Everyone assumed she had an educational good background, and to some extent, this was true. However, one fateful day, her life changed completely. Just before going to college, Kate opened up to her parents about being abused by someone close to the family when she was younger. Kate's parents were shocked by this confession. They felt guilty for not knowing the hardships their daughter had faced over the years. After learning this heartbreaking truth about their daughter, Kate's parents did everything they could to help her overcome it, but unfortunately, this traumatic experience left behind long-lasting consequences that became increasingly serious over time. Kate had struggled with addiction to both alcohol and illegal substances. Kate's parents recommended therapy to help her work through her issues, and she agreed to give it a try. They also suggested she move back in with them, thinking the family environment would aid in her recovery. Initially, the therapy seemed effective, but Kate continued to grapple with the emotional weight of her past, making it difficult for her to move forward. Kate's life underwent a major transformation when her psychiatrist diagnosed her with depression. Her father proposed a trip to anywhere in the world, which Kate eagerly accepted. She chose to travel to the Arctic Circle, driven by her long-held desire to see polar bears. Kate and her parents searched for suitable tours and eventually booked a trip. As the journey approached, Kate's parents noticed a marked change in her attitude, shifting from sadness to cheerful and positive. During the trip, Kate and her parents shared a wonderful experience, filled with joy and laughter. On the boat to the Arctic Circle, Kate met a fellow Russian tourist. They kept in touch throughout the trip, and when the trip ended, they still exchanged letters. Kate developed strong feelings for him, and eventually, which led her to make the decision to travel to Russia. Kate had finally begun to overcome her depression after traveling with her family in another country. However, due to visa issues, she was forced to return home. Despite this incident, Kate seems to have found joy in her life again. She planned to resolve her visa problems and had even started writing a book for her children. But everything changed on Saturday, June 12, 2009. Kate's family was away on a business trip, and she was alone at home. Normally, Kate would call her father to check in, but this time she didn't. Her father tried to reach her, but there was no answer. Concerned about her well-being, especially given her past struggles with addiction, her father asked someone to check on her. When the person arrived at Kate's home, they found her room empty, but the light was still on, suggesting that she had just stepped out and would return soon. However, Kate's medication, which she needed to take regularly, was still at home. Her parents were anxious, but they decided not to panic, thinking that Kate, being 28 years old, was capable of taking care of herself. They decided to wait until Monday, at which point her parents intended to contact the police. On Monday morning, Kate's father received a call from the bank. A bank employee informed him that someone had tried to cash a check for over $4,000 from Kate's account. The bank was unable to contact Kate, so they reached out to her father. This situation raised suspicions, as Kate's father knew she only had a few $100s in her account. The bank security team contacted Kate's father due to the large amount of the check. Although Kate's signature on the check appeared to be genuine, the bank still had concerns. The man who tried to cash the check was identified as Ethan Mack. Kate's father did not recognize Ethan's name, but he assumed Ethan might be an acquaintance of Kate's since the bank had verified her signature. As Kate was still unreachable, her father decided to contact the police. The police launched an investigation into Kate's disappearance and began by questioning Ethan Mack. Ethan claimed to have known Kate for years and stated that she had written the check to pay off old debts. He also claimed that he had frequently lent Kate money for various purchases, including clothing and jewelry. Investigations into Kate's disappearance led detectives to speak with her friends. They revealed that Kate had a long-standing friendship with Ethan. Although they were very close, her friends insisted that the relationship was not love. Ethan told detectives that he met Kate on Friday night and took her out for dinner at a restaurant. After dinner, he drove her home and then went about his own business. To support his alibi, Ethan showed detectives text messages he had exchanged with Kate, confirming their dinner plans. He also allowed detectives to search his home, where he lived with his mother, but nothing suspicious was found. However, the police still suspect his connection with the check and did not rule Ethan out as list of suspects. Detectives reconstructed Kate's activities on Friday night to determine her last whereabouts before she disappeared. She had seen her therapist in the afternoon and then visited the gym. Later, Kate entered a store and purchased a bottle of wine. Security footage showed her talking on the phone at the time, and it is possible that she was speaking with Ethan, who later picked her up and took her to dinner. Kate's parents remembered another unsettling detail from the day she went missing. Although she mentioned having some problems, she didn't specify what they were. Unfortunately, her parents did not remember this conversation until a few days later, and by then, the information was too late to be of any help in the search. As the weeks went by, Kate remained missing. Her parents felt frustrated with the police, believing they weren't doing enough to find Kate. However, in August, the case gained new information when a team of former police officers, led by lawyer Andy Savage, took it on. This team had been privately investigating unsolved cases and was particularly drawn to Kate's. The team consisted of 5 individuals, and all have significant experience in the investigative field. One of them, former Detective James Randall, began by examining Kate's bedroom. He noticed 2 suspicious things. Firstly, he found a packet of medication that Kate took regularly. Kate's parents confirmed that she was very diligent in taking her medication, so the fact that the packet was left behind was highly alarming. Next, a team member found Chinese currency on Kate's bed, which raised questions since Kate's parents had no idea where she got it or why she needed it. To gather more information, the team brought in Bobby Mitter, an expert in tracking individuals online. His skills are really useful. Bobby discovered that on the night Kate disappeared, she called her friend James around 10 p.m. but he didn't answer. Kate left a disturbing voicemail, saying someone had stolen her credit cards. Kate's phone was last active at 1:53 a.m., for some unknown reason, when she called her own voicemail. Further investigation by member Lewis revealed that the call was made from James Island, just a few kilometers from Kate's house. Another team member, Eugene Fraser, spoke with acquaintances on James Island and found something suspicious. Ethan Mack, who had allowed police to search his mother's home, didn't actually live there. Instead, he rented an apartment in a nearby building. Eugene's acquaintance, who happened to be Ethan's landlord, provided this crucial information. The detectives dug deeper and discovered that the police had not Ethan thoroughly investigated. They had only done a cursory search of his mother's house. The team decided to take matters into their own hands and began their own investigation. In the process, they found out that Ethan had a girlfriend named Heather Camp. When they asked Kate's parents about Heather, her mother remembered a strange encounter. About a month before Kate's disappearance, Kate had met Heather on a train from Washington, D.C., where Kate was experiencing visa issues to Russia. Heather had told Kate that she had been robbed of her wallet and was now destitute. Kate offered to help and lent her a substantial amount of money. Heather said she has found a job as a pediatric surgeon in South Carolina and will start work soon. Heather later said that her daughter had tragically died in a car accident in New Jersey. Her actions following this announcement seemed irrational and confusing. She did not go there, and her demeanor suggested that her daughter's death did not affect her greatly. Furthermore, they discovered that Heather was facing fraud charges in Indiana. She had impersonated a licensed physician by falsifying paperwork. The team gathered significant data, forcing them to re-examine the case from a new perspective. However, when they presented their findings to the police were completely reluctant to continue the investigation. The team discovered that the only way to get the police to take action was to gather undeniable proof that connected Heather to Kate's disappearance. To obtain this evidence, the team took drastic measures. They convinced the person who rented an apartment to Ethan Mack to install a hidden camera outside his apartment door. Additionally, they placed a GPS tracker in Ethan's car, allowing them to monitor his movements. Their efforts soon paid off. After analyzing Ethan's travel patterns, the detectives discovered that he had visited multiple pawn shops throughout the city. They followed his trail and found that at each shop, Ethan was selling small batches of jewelry. Although they couldn't confirm whether the jewelry belonged to Kate, the detectives felt they were closing in on a crucial lead. The group then hits a major roadblock when Ethan and Heather's landlord threatens to evict them because they haven't paid their rent. This made the detectives' investigation difficult, as losing access to the apartment would hinder their ability to monitor Ethan and Heather's activities. To address this issue, the detectives devised a plan to persuade the landlord to grant Ethan and Heather an extension on their rent payment. In exchange, the landlord required both Ethan and Heather to sign a contract committing to pay the outstanding debt. The team successfully negotiated this arrangement, and once the contract was signed, they immediately sent it to the laboratory for analysis. The primary objective was to compare the handwriting on the contract with Kate's signature on the $4,000 check. The results yielded a significant breakthrough. The handwriting expert confirmed, with absolute certainty, that the signature on the check matched Heather's handwriting on the contract. The team discovered that Heather had forged Kate's signature. However, they knew the police would be uncooperative, so they devised a new plan. They convinced the landlord to help them by telling Ethan that the apartment needed insect treatment. The team leader, dressed as an exterminator, accompanied the landlord to the apartment. But their plan almost failed. They realized Ethan only moved the car away from the house and did not actually leave. Upon entering the apartment, the investigator and the landlord were met with an unexpected surprise. Ethan was still at home, and Heather was the one driving his car. The investigator then had to think quickly and adjust his plan. They insist that the apartment needs to be disinfected and ask Ethan to wait outside while they spray the dangerous disinfectant. Ethan, unaware of the investigation, agreed to leave his apartment. Meanwhile, investigators begin searching for evidence to prove Ethan's involvement in Kate's disappearance. They found Ethan's backpack and examined its contents. Discovering Chinese money, it resembles the bills found on Kate's bed. However, the search yielded no other significant clues. The investigator and the landlord pretended to complete their task and left. The team needed a new strategy. After reviewing the footage from the camera outside Ethan's apartment, they noticed a man frequently entering the building, Terry Williams, a neighbor of the couple. The detective suspected that Terry might have information about Ethan and Heather's involvement in Kate's disappearance. The team decided to take a risk and offered Terry a substantial sum of money in exchange for his cooperation. They visited Terry's apartment with the offer, hoping he would reveal what he knew about Kate's disappearance. Detectives encountered an unexpected situation when they told Terry what was happening. Unbeknownst to them, Heather was at her home and overheard the conversation between the detectives and Terry. When the detectives started talking to Terry, Heather was extremely frightened. She immediately called Ethan and explained the situation in a hysterical state. The investigation team did not expect this, and they spent the next few days coming up with another plan. However, Terry later contacted the detectives and invited them to his home to discuss. Upon arriving at Terry's apartment, he reveals that although Ethan and Heather did not directly tell him about their involvement in Kate's disappearance, but he had suspected that the couple had done something wrong to Kate. Terry then produced an iPod that Heather had given him shortly after Kate's disappearance. He had assumed the iPod belonged to Kate. The detectives examined the device and, using its serial number, confirmed that it indeed belonged to Kate. This discovery provided the investigation team with sufficient evidence to return to the police department. The local police could no longer ignore the case and decided to take action. After reviewing the evidence gathered by the team, they arrested Ethan and Heather. During the initial interrogation, Heather agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claimed Kate's body was on Wat Ala Island, approximately 20 miles from her house. However, when the police searched the area, they found no of Kate's body. It became clear that Heather had given them false information. Andy Savage then tried a different approach, suspecting Heather's direct involvement in Kate's murder. He met with her and offered a deal. In exchange for revealing Kate's body location, he would help get her off the forgery charges papers. Heather, seeing this as her only chance, agreed to the deal. She provided a detailed description of the location on the outskirts of Wat Ala Island, claiming Kate's body was still there. The detectives decided to search the area without police accompaniment, but they were initially disappointed when they found nothing. However, they returned the next day, and they eventually discovered Kate's body. The forensic doctors were unable to determine the cause of Kate's death. But the truth eventually came to light when Heather began to confess. In August 2009, Heather signed a confession admitting to murder, obstruction of justice, and bank check forgery. The police investigation revealed that Heather had been committing fraud for years and had targeted Kate as her next victim during a trip from Washington. Heather later met Ethan and started a romantic relationship with him. Ethan, however, did not immediately plead guilty, and his trial began in October 2010. The prosecution used Heather's testimony to reconstruct the incident surrounding Kate's disappearance. According to Heather's account, on the day Kate vanished, Kate discovered that Heather had deceived her and stolen her credit cards. Kate threatened to inform her father. Heather confided in Ethan, who chose to support her despite his long-standing friendship with Kate. The investigation revealed that Kate was not alone with Ethan on the night she disappeared. Heather was also present. It appears that Heather and Ethan attempted to negotiate with Kate at a restaurant, trying to persuade Kate not to expose Heather's deception. During this meeting, Heather may have promised Kate that when she got to Ethan's apartment, Heather would return the stolen credit card to her. Upon Kate's arrival, Heather and Ethan may have been waiting for the right moment to end her life. However, the court ultimately questioned Heather's account of the incident and found her guilty, sentencing her to 39 years in prison. Ethan received a slightly more lenient sentence of 25 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shelby Erin Vaughn Holt. Shelby Erin Vaughn Holt was born on September 7, 2000, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, United States. She was the second of 5 children in her family, which included her mother, Shauna Hartman, father Toby Vaughn Holt, older sister Peyton Hartman, and younger siblings Davin Vaughn Holt and Isaac Vaughn Holt. Shelby graduated from Troy Center High School in 2018 and then spent 2 years trying different jobs, including working at a steakhouse, as she searched for her ideal career. She seems interested in pursuing a career in the therapeutic field, but has not yet made a final decision on her area of expertise. At 20 years old, Shelby was living life to the fullest. Her cheerful personality made her a beloved presence at social gatherings, and she loved to dance, sing, and spend time with friends. Besides, Shelby is active on Facebook, where she frequently shares photos of happy moments, many of which feature her young niece Camilla, who is the daughter of Peyton's sister. According to her mother, Shelby met Valerie Rose Hardick, a 22-year-old woman, on Facebook. Little is known about Valerie's life, but rumors suggest she had a difficult childhood, was involved with questionable people, and may have struggled with mental health issues. On June 20, 2021, at 6:48 p.m., Shelby called 911 and reported being injured. She stated that Valerie had shot her. Shortly after the call, police officers from the Fort Wayne Police Department arrived at Shelby's residence. Upon entering the house, they found Shelby severely injured, barely conscious, and she suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. A large pool of blood surrounded her. While one officer stayed with Shelby to provide assistance, the others searched the house to ensure no one else was injured and that the shooter was not still inside. While waiting for the ambulance local to arrive, the officers on the scene provided first aid to Shelby. A surgeon asked Shelby if she knew who had shot her, and she identified the perpetrator as Valerie. Emergency medical personnel soon took over Shelby's care, transporting her to a nearby hospital. She was in critical condition but remained conscious and alive. Shelby's family was notified of the incident, and the Fort Wayne Police Department began collecting evidence from her home. A key piece of evidence was discovered on a doorbell camera, which allowed authorities to identify a suspect after reviewing the footage. Police are appealing to the public for any information relating to the case. The following day, an unusual incident occurred in Ohio, about 50 kilometers away. Local police received calls about a suspicious woman lingering around a gas station convenience store around 10:30 in the morning. Eyewitnesses reported that the woman had been inside the store and around the gas pumps for about an hour, seemingly trying to see the credit card numbers of customers as they made their purchases. Police received a call from a man who reported encountering the woman at the convenience store. Accordingly, the woman had pointed a gun at his back. Following this report, police officers arrived at the gas station with caution, where they found the woman still present. She was arrested without any violent incidents occurring. The woman, identified as 22-year-old Valerie Rose Hardick, was found to be in possession of a 9mm handgun that matched the one used in the assault on Shelby. Shelby's previous statement identifying her attacker as Valerie, coupled with this new evidence, further solidifies that Valerie was the perpetrator. Furthermore, Valerie's car matched the one captured by House Shelby's doorbell camera, which was seen leaving the scene moments before Shelby made her emergency call. Valerie was arrested and taken to the county correctional facility, where she awaited her court hearing, despite the ongoing investigation. At the same time, Shelby was fighting for her life after being shot with a 9mm gun. Shelby suffered severe injuries to her chest and abdomen. To help her recover, doctors put her in a medically induced coma and did everything they could to save her. Unfortunately, 3 days after the violent attack on June 22, 2021, Shelby's body could not recover from the injuries, and she passed away. According to Shelby's mother, her daughter died after undergoing 4 complex surgeries on her abdomen that were unsuccessful. Shelby also received 20 blood transfusions, but her medical outlook was always poor. Even if she had survived, doctors believed that Shelby would have needed to have her legs amputated. Many questions remain about what motivated Valerie, a 22-year-old woman, to kill Shelby in such a brutal manner. Investigators suggested that jealousy was the motive. It was alleged that Shelby was in a relationship with a man to whom Valerie had strong feelings. Valerie was arrested and charged with 2 separate crimes: criminal assault and making aggravated threats. In the initial case, she was held in Ohio on $100,000 bail for allegedly threatening someone with a gun at a gas station. Later, she was transferred to Allen County to face murder charges in connection with the death of Shelby. A private funeral ceremony was held for Shelby on June 29, 2021, and her remains were cremated afterward. As the murder trial progressed, Valerie Rose Hardick entered a plea agreement in early 2022. She pleaded guilty to murdering Shelby, attributing her actions to mental illness. A sentencing hearing is then set for September 2022 in Allen County Superior Court. During the hearing, Valerie pleaded guilty but mentally ill, as agreed upon in the plea deal. Her defense attorney presented mitigating circumstances, including her difficult childhood, affected by the loss of his stepmother, abuse by his half-brother, and mental health problems. Prosecutors stressed that jealousy was the insignificant motive behind Valerie's decision to kill Shelby. They also highlighted Valerie's extensive criminal history, which had worsened over time. Notably, Valerie was on probation and part of an alternative program due to prior charges when she murdered Shelby. During the hearing, Valerie exhibited unpredictable behavior, appearing composed and aware at times, while at other moments she seemed anxious, distracted, and even smiled at Shelby's family. However, she answered the court's questions accurately. However, Valerie never expressed remorse or apologized to Shelby's family. Shelby's parents were extremely sad and desperate because of the loss of their beloved child. Shelby's father recalled that his daughter had a strong affection for symbols that represented peace. He stated that Valerie seemed to take pride in admitting to the murder, showing no remorse for her crime. He also questioned whether jealousy was the only reason for the killing, he believing there must be more to the story. He vowed to continue seeking answers about the tragedy. He also expressed concern for Valerie's children, who would undoubtedly suffer as a result of their mother's actions. Shelby's father shared that he had forgiven Valerie to find peace of mind, inspired by his faith in God. He was confident that Shelby was with God and expressed his deep love for her. Shelby's mother, Shauna, remembers her daughter as a kind and thoughtful person who always went out of her way to help friends, no matter the distance. Shauna is haunted by memories of her dead daughter and struggles with guilt and helplessness for not being able to keep her safe. Shauna acknowledged Shelby's bravery in naming her attacker twice and continuing to fight for her life after the assault. Shauna described Shelby's severe injuries, including a racing heart that her body couldn't sustain. Despite incurring nearly $500,000 in medical expenses, Shauna didn't seek compensation, as these were waived upon Shelby's death. The funeral expenses were around $115,000, but Shauna didn't want any money from Valerie. Shelby's mother, Shauna, fought back tears as she shared that all she had left were memories of her daughter. She expressed a wish to trade places with her child, revealing that the pain of her loss was so overwhelming on some days that she couldn't even get out of bed. The court had heard from the lawyers and Shelby's family, and now it was waiting for the judge's decision. Under Indiana law, the possible sentence ranged from 45 to 65 years, with an average of 55 years. Valerie's defense team asked for the minimum sentence, pointing out various factors that they believed should be taken into consideration. In contrast, the prosecution argued for the maximum sentence. Before making his decision, the judge stated that it was clear the murder was planned and that Valerie knew exactly what she was doing when she committed the crime, as evidenced by her attempt to flee to Ohio. The judge acknowledged that Valerie had faced significant difficulty in her life, including inadequate education, personal trauma, and mental health issues. Despite having a traumatic past, it was not accepted as a justification for her behavior. As a result, the judge sentenced Valerie to the maximum 65-year prison term. The judge also ordered the destruction of the murder weapon. Valerie is currently serving her sentence at the Indiana Women's Prison, with the earliest possible release date being June 18, 2087, when she will be 72 years old, according to the American Correctional System's records. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Soni Millbrook. Soni Millbrook was born on February 15, 1981, in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. She is the daughter of Christine Millbrook Bennett and grew up in a large family with many siblings, having 2 sisters and 3 brothers. This warm and close-knit environment helped her build a special relationship with her cousin Jenny during her teenage years. Soni became a popular student at her high school. In 1998, when she was 17 years old and in the 11th grade, she met a man named Lakeith Moody, who was older than her. She soon began a relationship with him. However, the relationship was not a happy one, as Lakeith was abusive and violent, leaving visible injuries on Soni's body. Despite this, they had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy named after his father. In 1999, Soni's mother discovered a bruise on Soni's chest. When her mother asked her about it, Soni cried and confessed that Lakeith had caused the injury. A friend of Soni's also witnessed the injury, but Soni refused to report Lakeith's behavior to the police. Lakeith often controlled Soni and tried to isolate her from her friends and family. That same year, Soni moved into an apartment in the Fraser neighborhood of Memphis. One day, the management informed her of an incident at her apartment. When she arrived, she found a chaotic scene: damaged furniture, missing clothes, a destroyed television, food smeared on the walls, and personal hygiene products scattered everywhere, including under the stairs. Strangely, the mirror had the words, "Kiki loves you," with Kiki being Lakeith's nickname. Lakeith's behavior made Soni's relatives even more concerned. On October 31, 2000, Soni and her cousin, Pamela, went to a bar called The Mirage with Lakeith. While at the bar, Lakeith became aggressive towards Soni by slapping her and throwing a drink in her face. After the incident, Soni and Pamela left the bar and got into their car. According to Pamela, Soni was shaken and frightened by Lakeith's actions. Soni asked Pamela to take her home immediately because she was afraid that Lakeith would come after them. When Soni got home, she locked the door securely. An hour later, Lakeith came to the house, yelling and banging on the door. Pamela had to threaten to call the police to make Lakeith leave. Once Soni calmed down, her cousin decided to leave her alone. However, that evening, Pamela received a call informing her that Soni had been hospitalized. Lakeith had forced his way into the house, and when Soni tried to end the relationship, he attacked her. He tore off Soni's clothes and hit her on the head, face, chest, arms, and between her thighs. She suffered bruises all over her body, loose teeth, and even lost consciousness because Lakeith choked her until she passed out. Lakeith later accidentally discovered that Soni was on birth control pills, and he attacked her again. The next morning, Soni called Pamela and asked her cousin to take her to the hospital because of serious health problems. In late 2008, Soni, then 27, worked at a Christian institute. She was considered a reliable and punctual employee. Therefore, when she took time off or missed work, it was usually due to important reasons. Once, she called her supervisor to report that she could not come to work because her face was badly bruised, and she did not want the children to see it. After she asked for a day off, director Leslie approved it. However, when Sony returned a few days later, the bruises were so obvious that the director allowed her to wear sunglasses while working at the academy. Lakeith's violence not only affected Sony and their children but also caused concern in the community. In April 2008, Lakeith was found sitting in an SUV with a gun in his hand, despite being previously prohibited from owning a gun due to a criminal record. Furthermore, he had previously served 2 years in prison for burglary and 3 years in prison for drug possession with intent to distribute. Sony tried to avoid her boyfriend, but it was almost impossible. The situation came to a head on October 6, 2008. At that time, Sony did not arrive at the academy by 5 p.m. Her sister received a text message from Sony saying that Lakeith was holding her hostage in his home and had been beating her all day. Sony also provided her home address. Sony's sister called the police. 2 officers went to Sony's house. They knocked on the door, but there was no answer since it was locked from the inside. They then called the security department to unlock the door. When the police entered the house, they saw Sony's boyfriend jumping out of the back window of the apartment. Sony stood in the hallway, crying and unable to speak because of her grief. Her 4 children were also present, making for a very heartbreaking scene. Sony's face and neck were covered in bruises and scratches. When she calmed down, Sony explained what had happened. Sony and Lakeith began arguing, and he refused to let her leave the house. She told the police that Lakeith would not let her or the children near the window. She also said that Lakeith injured one of their children by grabbing the child and preventing her from taking the child to the hospital. Sony said that her boyfriend had been both physically and verbally abusive. During one altercation, he tied a baby blanket around her neck and choked her until she lost consciousness. When the police arrived, Lakeith threatened to choke her again and said he would kill her if the police did not let him go. The police searched the area but did not find Lakeith. Sony then left the house with the children in her car. 3 days later, she filed a restraining order against Lakeith, fearing for her life and wanting to prevent any contact with him. However, she missed the hearing, and the protective order was never granted. Nearly 6 months later, on March 10, 2009, Sony was still in contact with Lakeith. That day, he was supposed to pick up the children for a doctor's appointment, but instead, he began arguing with Sony, accusing her of having a new boyfriend. The argument quickly turned violent as he slapped her and pulled her hair. She tried to break free and ran out of the apartment while Lakeith screamed and threatened to kill her. Lakeith did not catch Sony but instead kidnapped their youngest child, an infant, and drove away at high speed. A police patrol alerted to the domestic disturbance arrived as Lakeith was running away. The officers attempted to stop him, but he escaped. In early 2010, Sony, 28, was studying at Southeast Tennessee Community College. She had to stay home to care for her 5th child, who was 9 weeks old, because of poor health. In January, Sony and the children moved into the Budget Lodge in Memphis. However, on the first day Sony moved in, she and Lakeith's arguments became so loud that motel staff had to intervene because they were disturbing other guests. Sony and Lakeith could not maintain a peaceful relationship. They argued constantly, disturbing neighbors and management with the noise. On January 22, a hotel security guard witnessed Lakeith in a very agitated state. He arrived at a high rate of speed in Sony's car and then began yelling at her as she stood on the second-floor balcony with the children. In his anger, he threw a bag of groceries at her. The security guard arrived and told Lakeith not to make any noise or throw things in the hotel. Lakeith was instructed to settle the argument in his room. However, Lakeith told the security guard that he did not need to worry about it. Lakeith then locked his car and accompanied the security guard to an unoccupied room on the 3rd floor. The security guard asked Lakeith to hand over any hotel keys he had. Surprisingly, Lakeith had keys to 3 different rooms, even though he was not registered as a guest. The next day, Lakeith and Sony moved into room 222 with their children. However, the night manager asked Lakeith to leave that evening. Although Lakeith left as requested, he soon returned. The arguments between Sony and Lakeith continued for several more days until the guard asked Lakeith to leave the hotel for good. As Lakeith left, the front desk clerk tried to calm him down. The guard also warned Lakeith not to come back that night. Lakeith got into her car and drove away. Some time later, Sony spoke to Pamela and confided that she was having problems in her life. She was staying at the motel and wanted to talk to Pamela about something important. Sony said that she would call if she left the motel or if her boyfriend left first. The next day started normally. At 7 a.m., Sony took the younger children to daycare and the older children to school. Around 11 a.m., the housekeeping manager knocked on Sony's door and spoke to her through the window to inform her that they needed to pay the rent or they would have to leave. The manager returned several times that day. On a visit around 2:30 p.m., Lakeith answered the door. The room was dark. Lakeith told the manager that his mother was on her way to pick up the money. On January 27th, Sony did not pick up her older daughter on time. So the school secretary called the child's grandmother, Christine, to ask her to come pick up the girl. When Christine tried to contact Sony, she received no response. At around 6 p.m., she discovered that her other grandchildren were still at daycare. Concerned that she could not reach Sony, Christine asked her husband to pick up the younger children from daycare while she went to the school to find out what was wrong. They contacted the police and reported the incident at approximately 10:30 p.m. Later, on January 28th, the housekeeping manager re-entered room 222 and began taking inventory of the items that Sony and Lakeith had left behind. The room was filled with clothing in a large trash bag, which was then taken to a storage area. After the room was cleaned, it was ready for new guests. On January 29th, James and Rhonda Sargent moved into the room. They quickly noticed a foul odor and attempted to block it with incense, but were unable to eliminate it completely. They also discovered that previous tenants had attempted the same, as they found scented tissues in the tiles and ceiling vents. Because the smell was so strong that they reported it. On January 29th, officers from the Memphis Police Department's Missing Persons Unit visited the hotel to inquire about Sony's whereabouts, as that was where she was last seen. However, they did not enter room 222. Lakeith was arrested on February 2nd, around 7 p.m., while inside Sony's car at a shopping center. He was held for 48 hours on a charge of car theft. During questioning about Sony's disappearance, Lakeith said he last saw her on January 26th. He explained they had met in the hotel parking lot that morning after Sony had dropped off her children at school. They went into the room, had sex, and then returned outside. Lakeith then took Sony's car keys and left the hotel. He claimed Sony planned to use her welfare and student loan money to buy a new car, so he wasn't worried about keeping her car. Lakeith also said he had been living in the car since January 26th. However, investigators discovered that Lakeith had actually been staying at a different hotel. Additionally, given the snowy weather during that time, it was unlikely that he had spent the night in the car. On February 3rd, police found a debit card with Sony's name on it and several recent purchase receipts inside the car. That same day, police also searched the clothes stored at the hotel for DNA or other evidence, but found nothing. Due to the lack of evidence linking Lakeith to Sony's disappearance, he was released. Sony's cousin and her mother had to undertake the painful task of going to the hotel where Sony was staying to collect her belongings. At that time, Sony's cousin had a bad feeling but did not find any evidence. On February 4th, the police went to Sony's cousin's house and found a DVD player in Sony's wallet. Sony's cousin said they had received the items from Moody. According to the cousin, Lakeith borrowed the DVD player on January 24th under the pretext of watching a movie and drove a red car that day. When he saw Lakeith again a few days later, the cousin asked why Lakeith did not pick up the children on January 27th. But Lakeith evaded the question. When the cousin asked about Sony's whereabouts, Lakeith left the DVD player and wallet behind and left. Around that time, guests James and Rhonda Sargent requested to be moved out of room 222 because of the persistent odor. Since there were no other rooms available, they moved to another hotel. Later guests in room 222 also complained of a foul odor, despite the room being cleaned several times and the carpets being cleaned in early February. The odor persisted, only easing slightly over several days. On February 4th, homicide detectives arrived at the hotel to investigate. By this time, room 222 had been occupied and cleaned at least 3 times. As a result, the detectives were unable to enter the room to collect evidence. Instead, they asked hotel staff if they had noticed anything unusual. All staff responded that nothing was unusual. Then, on February 7th, James and Rhonda returned to the hotel and changed rooms 3 times. During one of the changes, they spent the night in room 222. While there, they informed management that the room still smelled unpleasant. To address this issue, in March, the hotel performed a more thorough cleaning of room 222. The staff cleaned the carpet, bedding, shower curtains, and window blinds. However, the results were shocking. The odor not only remained but became even more intense. The manager discussed the issue with the security guard. During the conversation, they recalled that the previous tenant, Sony, had disappeared at the end of January. The security guard recalled the events that occurred at that time and suggested that the manager check room 222 for traces of blood or cleaning agents. 10 minutes later, the manager returned and asked the guard to accompany him. What they found was horrifying. The 2 men entered the room where the manager had removed the mattress from one of the beds, leaving only the bed frame. The bottom of the bed frame had a cover. When they lifted the box spring, they discovered a large gap where anything could be hidden from view. Looking through the sturdy edges of the bed frame, they saw the unthinkable, a decomposing body. They called the police, who arrived at the scene shortly after. The bed frame was found to have many marks on it, and there were 2 pieces of broken wood near the headboard. A towel and a cloth bag were found between the legs of the body. The victim was wearing a shirt but nothing below the waist. The forensic team's autopsy determined that the cause of death was strangulation with a coaxial cable. The cable was wrapped around the neck, under one arm, around the chest, and ended behind the back. The medical examiner concluded that it would take at least 2 to 3 minutes of sustained pressure to cause death. In order to find the killer, the police collected items from between the victim's legs for analysis. The victim's shirt had an unidentified fingerprint. In addition, the scarf and the cloth bag did not belong to the victim. DNA samples that matched Sony's genetic profile, as well as that of a woman, were discovered. More remarkably, male DNA was also found on the cable, which led to the hypothesis that Sony had died at the time she was reported missing. The coaxial cable used in the case may have come from a DVD player that Lakeith borrowed from her cousin. Lakeith had been arrested by police for illegal possession of a weapon, and he was also the last person seen with Sony alive, making him a suspect in the case. He was in Sony's car when he was arrested and taken to the Mason detention facility. On March 18th, authorities launched an investigation into why the case unfolded in such a strange way. The chief of police said the victim's family deserved an explanation and acknowledged that the circumstances of the case were unprecedented, making it a shocking case of domestic violence. He also regretted that the room where Sony died had been cleaned and rented out multiple times, making it difficult for police to collect evidence. However, this explanation was met with skepticism. One of the first tenants, Rhonda, said the police should have been allowed into the room when James and Rhonda visited in January and would have found Sony sooner if they had noticed the smell of a decomposing body. Rhonda believes the police were slow in finding Sony. Following the loss, Sony's family held a funeral for her on March 24th. Sony's children were placed in the care of her sister on April 1st. They are currently trying to gain legal custody of the children. Sony's sister said that although the children were the primary victims, everyone in the family's lives was turned upside down by the loss. She pledged to take care of Sony's children, making sure they had enough food, clothes, and toys, and to keep them together as a family. She also said Sony had benefited from a social program, and she would continue to care for the children as her sister had. The card had been loaded with money before Sony went missing because she received an income tax refund. Police tracked the card's activity and found that it was in Lakeith's possession. During the surveillance, they noticed that the card was used on February 1st at a convenience store Sony usually visited to withdraw cash using her electronic welfare transfer card. Notably, this occurred 4 days after Sony went missing. Officers went to the store and requested the owner to show them the footage from their 16 security cameras. Through the footage, they observed that on the morning of February 1st, at 11:38 a.m., a man dressed in yellow conducted a transaction at the store. He used a Sony card to buy a bottle of orange juice, withdrew cash, and purchased a cigar. After making these purchases, he returned to a car driven by someone else. With all the evidence against him, Lakeith's trial began in the first week of February 2014, more than 4 years after the crime. By then, the Budget Lodge Hotel involved in the crime had closed. Lakeith did not admit his guilt. During the trial, the prosecutor portrayed the case as the tragic end of a tumultuous relationship. In contrast, Lakeith's defense attorney argued that there was insufficient evidence to establish his client's guilt. He pointed out that there were no witnesses or physical evidence to prove Lakeith's crime. The attorney also noted that the police found fingerprints on the victim's bed frame, but those fingerprints did not match Lakeith's. This suggests that someone else may have been involved in the crime. Additionally, the attorney argued that there was reason to suspect that the victim had had relationships with several other men over the years. He also emphasized that his client had never been convicted of domestic violence against the victim. Furthermore, he revealed something that the public did not know. Sony moved in with Lakeith again because she had to leave a relative's home due to a rat infestation. On February 6th, video footage showing Lakeith using a Sony prepaid card 4 days after her death was presented to the court. The defense claimed his calm demeanor throughout the transaction demonstrated his innocence, while the prosecution saw it as evidence of a cold and ruthless man with no regard for the crimes he was accused of committing. On February 7, 2014, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. On February 10th, he appealed the conviction, arguing that the court had erred in considering his past acts of domestic violence and that the evidence was insufficient. On July 7, 2015, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the convictions, affirming the decision. Hey everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Romina Celeste Núñez. Romina Celeste Núñez was born in 1990 in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. She is the oldest of 2 daughters. After her parents' divorce at a young age, her mother, Miriam Rodriguez, single-handedly raised the girls. Despite her ex-husband's lack of financial support and interest in their daughters, Miriam worked several jobs to support her family financially. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister. At 17, she began a dating relationship with a man named Christopher. He pursues her romantically and they make plans for the future together. When Romina discovered she was pregnant, she informed Christopher. Rather than being supportive, he gave her a difficult choice. She had to decide between ending the pregnancy or breaking up with him. Romina was deeply hurt by Christopher's words, but she sought the advice of her parents. After their discussion, she decided to keep the child. Her main concern was that if she had an abortion at such a young age, she might never be able to become a mother again. Romina felt she had no other choice. Her lover, Christopher, ended all contact with Romina, never showing any interest in her or their child's future. At 18 years old, Romina gave birth to a son named Lucas. However, the arrival of the baby made their already difficult financial situation even worse. Money was scarce, and Romina's mother had to support both her daughter and her grandson. Desperate to improve their situation, Romina moved to Spain, hoping to find better job opportunities. However, in Paraguay, she struggled to find a decent job with good pay. She then reached out to her maternal aunt, who lived in Spain, and the aunt invited Romina to join her. Romina's aunt reassured her that settling in Europe, particularly in Spain, would be easier and offered more opportunities. Romina made a quick decision and packed her essentials. She bought a plane ticket to Spain and set off, leaving her 2-year-old son with her mother and younger sister temporarily. She planned to reunite with her son once she found a new home and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and then traveled to the nearby town of Alcobendas, where her aunt took her in. Romina quickly started looking for work and was lucky. She landed a job as a hotel administrator, earning a decent salary. She sent some of the money back home and used the rest to rent her own apartment, not wanting to be a burden to her relatives. It wasn't long before Romina met a man named Javier, with whom she had a passionate romance. Javier was also an immigrant, having left El Salvador a few years prior in search of a better life. He worked in construction and seemed like a good partner. Romina's situation became complicated when she became pregnant. Despite this, she and Javier tried to make their relationship work. However, after the birth of their son, they eventually broke up. The breakup left Romina in a difficult position as a single parent in a foreign country with no clear direction. Romina's aunt provided temporary support by letting her stay with her. A few months later, when her son was around 6 months old, she went back to work due to financial necessity. However, her life took another turn for the worse. Initially, she ignored her poor health, attributing it to stress and exhaustion. Eventually, she visited a doctor and was diagnosed with cancer. She underwent multiple rounds of chemotherapy, which caused significant physical changes, including hair loss and weight loss. Despite these challenges, she bravely battled the disease and eventually overcame it. Following her treatment, Romina made a quick recovery and continued to work. She used wigs to hide her hair loss. Romina believed she had overcome the toughest challenges and was now due for a happy time. After saving money, she planned a trip to Spain with her eldest son, mother, and younger sister. During the summer of 2017, Romina attended an event with friends and met a man named Raul Diaz. Raul Diaz makes a strong impression with his attractive appearance, stable career, and solid financial situation. Smitten by Romina's beauty, he asked mutual friends about her and showed interest. Romina also found Raul appealing and agreed to go on a date with him. Raul, nearly 15 years older than Romina, worked as a lead process engineer at a major energy company. He had 2 failed marriages and 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. Despite their age difference and complicated pasts, Romina felt no intimidation. As a single mother raising sons from 2 previous relationships, Romina felt a connection with Raul. After their first date, the couple knew they were meant to be and didn't want to be apart. Romina was overjoyed, and her excitement was contagious as she shared her feelings with her friends. Raul showered her with thoughtful gestures daily, including surprise gifts, romantic getaways, and heartfelt compliments. She truly believed she had found her soulmate, someone who would love and accept her and her sons unconditionally. However, Romina Bliss was short-lived as disturbing rumors about Raul began to surface. She heard that he had been abusive and cruel to his previous spouses, which ultimately led to the breakdown of both his marriages. Despite her concerns, Romina initially chose to disregard these rumors. Despite the significant age gap between them, and each having children from previous relationships, they decided to continue their relationship. Just 6 months into their relationship, they decided to cohabitate and settled into a luxurious villa on the beautiful island of Lanzarote in the Canary Islands. To Romina, this place was like a real heaven, but her happiness was short-lived. Raul, the man she once thought was her ideal partner, gradually became an brute and controlling man in the family. The three of them, Romina, her youngest son, and Raul, struggled to live together in harmony. Raul attempted to present himself as a husband and good father, and Romina even thought he would be the ideal father for her children. He promised her a long and happy life together, where he would fully support her and the children, leaving them wanting for nothing. Believing Raul's words, Romina agreed to marry him when he proposed. However, Raul wanted them to have some private time after the wedding, to they enjoy their time together. In fact, Raul wanted to take Romina's oldest child out of Paraguay and also wanted to get rid of her youngest son. Romina trusted Raul, despite her friends' concerns about his unusual behavior. In June 2018, her fiancé, Raul, bought tickets for Romina and her child to travel to Paraguay, but purchased a return ticket only for the Romina. When Romina returned home, she told her mother and younger sister about Raul, but they were skeptical of his intentions, suspecting he might be trying to get rid of her child. This led to a disagreement between Romina and her loved ones. A few days later, Romina returned to Spain, she promising to return in the fall. Upon Romina's return, she was warmly welcomed and experienced 2 months of happiness with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before their wedding, he brutally attacked her. This incident shocked Romina, but Raul begged for forgiveness on his knees, promising it wouldn't happen again. Believing him, Romina didn't report the incident to the police and kept it a secret. On August 10th, she held a wedding with Raul, covering up her bruises and marrying the man who would later take her life. 2 weeks after her wedding, Romina traveled back to Paraguay for a brief visit with her family, rather than to pick up her sons as she had originally intended. Romina's mother and younger sister were shocked by the changes they saw in her. Romina seemed upset and lost, had a noticeable limp, and bruises on her neck, which she tried to conceal with a scarf. When asked about her condition, Romina would remain silent or claim the injuries were caused by an accident. Romina told her family that her husband suggested the visit, as she had not seen her children in a while and missed them dearly. Her mother, Miriam, even praised her son-in-law for his kindness. However, Miriam still sensed something was wrong and was concerned about her daughter's unhappiness. Romina spent almost a month at home, which surprised her family, especially since she had just gotten married. Eventually, in mid-September, she secretly borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain. This was because her husband refused to pay for her trip back. This should have been a warning, but Romina still held on to the hope that her marriage would ultimately be happy. Romina's mother, younger sister, and 2 sons last saw her at the airport on September 17th. After returning to her husband, Romina's life gradually turned into a nightmare. It was eventually revealed that her husband, Raul, was addicted to drugs and no longer hid his addiction from her. While under the influence, he became violent and tortured her. Although Raul repeatedly abused Romina, whenever she tried to leave him, he would make promises to change and vow that the abuse would not happen again. After each incident, there will be a brief period of peace, during which Raul will show affection, where Raul would show affection, give gifts, and plan romantic dates. However, over time, these lulls became shorter, and the episodes of violence occurred more often. Just before the new year, Romina confided in her best friend about her fear of Raul, believing he might one day kill her. On December 29th, Raul severely beat Romina, forcing her to seek medical attention. Hospital staff suspected something was wrong and wanted to report the matter to the police. However, Raul intervened, claiming Romina had injured herself and denying any wrongdoing. Romina then refused hospitalization, choosing to go home instead. On January 1, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, attempted to reach her daughter by phone multiple times, but Romina didn't answer. Concerned, Miriam then called her daughter's spouse, Raul, but he didn't answer either. After several days of not hearing from her daughter, Miriam sent a message to Raul stating that she was going to report this to the police if she didn't get any feedback. Raul immediately responded by calling Miriam back and explaining that he and Romina had an argument on December 31st. Following the argument, Romina packed her belongings and left him. Raul assured Miriam that Romina was just upset and would return once she cooled down, as she had done before, in similar situations. However, Miriam was not convinced by Raul's explanation and suspected that something may have happened to her daughter. She insisted that Raul go to the police to report the situation. Raul did not report his wife's disappearance until January 8, and only did so because her relatives pressured him to take action. However, his story was different this time. He claimed his wife had taken his money after they quarreled and might have traveled to Paraguay to visit their children. Raul's testimony was inconsistent and contradictory, fueling further questions and doubts. As a result, law enforcement took a closer look at Raul and the couple's life. After interviewing friends and relatives, they uncovered signs of a troubled marriage. Romina had confided in loved ones about Raul's abusive behavior. Others had noticed bruises and injuries on her body, leading them to suspect that something more serious was going on. Raul was placed under secret surveillance, and his phone calls were tapped. Despite this, he seemed to know that he was being watched and was extremely cautious for a long time. The investigation continued, and investigators soon discovered a crucial piece of information. On December 29th, Romina was taken to the hospital with severe signs of beatings, but her husband forbade her from reporting the incident to the police. This incident did not happen just once, as Romina had reported domestic violence a few months ago, but she withdrew the report the next day. Raul eventually let his guard down during a phone conversation with a police officer who was a relative. In this conversation, he claimed that his wife was no longer alive and that her body would never be found. This is an important lead in the case, and Raul was arrested as the main suspect. He was then taken in for an interrogation. During questioning, Raul claiming that on New Year's Eve, Romina had become intoxicated and demanded that he move her children into their home immediately. When he refused, Romina became aggressive, throwing objects at him and starting a fight. Raul claimed that he left the house to calm down, but returned a couple of hours, he later to find Romina unresponsive in the bathtub. Raul claimed Romina died from suffocation due to being heavily intoxicated, but he was afraid of being suspected of being her killer. As a result, Raul attempted to conceal the evidence and decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. However, everyone was amazed at the way he handled the body. Raul claimed that he burned Romina's body in a barbecue area located in a private courtyard of their upscale residential complex. He believed the private location would prevent neighbors from seeing or smelling the burning body. Unfortunately for Raul, a barbecue is not an efficient tool for burning a body, and the remains were still intact after a few hours. He then took out the remains, dismembered the body, packed them in bags, and rented a car a couple of days later. Raul drove to a remote, deserted area on the island and threw the dismembered body into the sea from a rocky point. Authorities searched the shoreline for weeks, scouring the areas where Raul claimed he had disposed of the remains. Divers were also involved in searching the ocean floor. Tragically, despite massive search efforts involving numerous volunteers, no body fragments were recovered. The case continued unfolding, with Raul eventually being formally charged with domestic violence and murder on January 16. Following a thorough search of Raul's home using specialized equipment and luminol, investigators discovered multiple traces of washed-up blood in various rooms. The investigation also revealed that Raul had bought caustic soda on the internet, a strong chemical often used to dissolve and remove organic substances and old paint. In a room on the second level, further evidence was uncovered. The man had attempted to clean a bloody stain on the floor, but in doing so, he damaged the flooring and decided to paint over the area. According to the investigation, this room is where Raul chopped his wife into pieces. Key evidence was discovered that suggested a violent struggle took place. A broken piece of Romina's fingernail with blood and a layer of skin from Raul were found on the floor, indicating she was still alive and resisting when the attack occurred. Additionally, in the bathroom, Romina's contact lens was discovered stuck to a tile on the wall, possibly dislodged from a forceful blow to her face. Despite their exhaustive search, investigators initially failed to find Romina the body. However, the police station received a call from a tourist who reported a suspicious object on the beach, a piece of lung tissue that could have belonged to either a human or an animal. In late February, forensic analysis confirmed that the lung tissue belonged to Romina. Throughout the investigation, Raul maintained his innocence, sticking to his claim that Romina had unintentionally drowned in the bathtub due to intoxication. Notwithstanding evidence of a violent struggle found in the house, Raul insisted he did not use any tools or objects to dismember her body. Raul's claim of trying to burn his wife's body completely on a barbecue was untrue. There were several reasons why this could not have happened. Firstly, it would have been impossible for him to place his wife Romina's body on the barbecue in his yard. Secondly, even if he had been able to, the prolonged exposure to the fire would not have made the bones fragile enough for them to fall apart on their own without any tools. Additionally, in order to separate the lung from the body, it would have been necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. Despite the investigation's proof, it was never determined exactly how Raul killed his wife. However, evidence of a struggle was found in the house, suggesting that he may have beaten her to death. It was clear that Raul had dismembered her body in the same room where he later repainted the floor to cover up the bloodstains. Raul's trial was repeatedly delayed. During this time, he changed lawyers several times. Eventually, due to overwhelming evidence, Raul admitted to accidentally killing his wife during a fight, contradicting his previous claim that he had found her dead in the bathtub. It wasn't until June 2023 that he was finally found guilty. However, Romina's loved ones felt the sentence was too lenient. Raul received a sentence of 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for domestic violence, 1 year for the physical harm inflicted on Romina in December 2018, which resulted in her hospitalization, and several months for physical abuse. The combined punishment for all the offenses was almost 16 years in prison. Raul is currently serving his sentence, but at the same time, he is trying to have the court's decision overturned by filing appeals. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Annie Lee. Annie Lee was born on July 3, 1985, in San Jose, California, to Vivian Van Lee and Hogan Lee, Vietnamese immigrants. As an only child, Annie demonstrated exceptional intelligence and talent from an early age, consistently excelling in her studies and being considered the top student in her school. Annie's favorite subjects were chemistry and biology. Her teachers believed she had a bright future in science, with some even predicting she might one day win a Nobel Prize. Throughout her school years, Annie actively participated in scientific conferences, where her work garnered various awards and recognition. As a high school student, she secured a $65,000 scholarship to study at any U.S. university. Annie chose the University of Rochester in New York, where she studied cellular development biology and medical anthropology. She later enrolled in Yale University's graduate school, working in a scientific laboratory and pursuing a doctoral degree in chemistry and biology. Annie's dissertation focused on the study of diseases caused by metabolic disorders. During her time working in the laboratory, she gained much research knowledge, which contributed to the treatment of diabetes and certain types of cancer. Annie, a student at the University of Rochester in New York, while pursuing her studies, met Jonathan Widosky, a fellow student and promising scientist. The two quickly dating, and their parents were pleased with their relationship. After graduating, Annie moved to New Haven, Connecticut, to attend Yale, while Jonathan chose to pursue his studies at Columbia University in New York. Despite the distance, the couple maintained their romance, visiting each other every weekend and making plans for their future. In the summer of 2009, Jonathan proposed to Annie with a beautiful diamond ring, and she happily accepted. They set their wedding date for Sunday, September 13, 2009. Initially, they only shared the news with their parents and close friends, keeping their colleagues in the dark. It wasn't until a week before the wedding, on September 6, that Annie sent out emails to friends and colleagues, announcing their upcoming marriage and a wedding invitation. The day after, the news spread rapidly throughout the department and the lab where Annie worked, becoming the most discussed topic. Annie and her fiancé had planned a wedding ceremony on Long Island, followed by a honeymoon at a luxurious resort in Greece. A few months before she went missing, Annie had written an article for the university publication, where she cautioned students about potential dangers and provided safety tips for when they were off campus. However, despite being aware of the risks, Annie herself fell victim to an unexpected tragedy at her workplace. On Tuesday, September 8, Annie left her university dormitory, where she shared a room with 3 friends, and headed to the University Medical Center laboratory, where she worked. The laboratory building, located on Amistad Street, has restricted access and requires a pass and special key card for entry and movement within the premises. A CCTV camera at the entrance captured Annie entering the building around 10 o'clock that morning. She went to her office, changed her clothes, stored her personal belongings, put on a medical coat, locked the door, and proceeded to the biolab. However, Annie never returned to her office that day and seemed to vanish in the corridors. Unfortunately, no one ever saw her alive again. On the evening Annie went missing, her dormitory neighbors were the first to discover the incident. They had grown accustomed to Annie's punctual nature, as she usually returned home at the same time every day. However, as midnight approached and she failed to return, her friends began to worry. Their concerns deepened when they were unable to reach Annie on her phone. Deciding to take action, they reported her disappearance to the police. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Annie's parents and fiancé had also been unable to contact her that night. Initially, they had assumed she was working late due to her heavy workload and would call them back when she was available. When the police arrived, they weren't too worried. They had heard what had happened and assumed that Annie was nervous before the wedding and needed time to calm down. However, their opinion quickly changed after examining Annie's office and reviewing the CCTV footage. They also tracked her movements within the building using her key card. The evidence revealed that Annie had entered the building in the morning but never exited. Her personal belongings, including her clothes, bag, wallet, and cell phone, were still in her office. Despite an extensive search, no sign of Annie was found, leaving behind only the unsettling feeling that she had vanished into thin. The disappearance of Annie Lee, a graduate student, led to an extensive investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Those who knew Annie personally described her as intelligent, kind, cheerful, and energetic, with no known enemies. Her family and fiancé anxiously waited for news, hope she will return safely. However, detectives were less optimistic, concluding that it was likely she was no longer alive. The laboratory building, crime scene, was placed under guard, and the list of suspects was narrowed down to staff and students with authorized access. The university atmosphere was tense because everyone realized that the killer might be somewhere nearby. Annie's fiancé, Jonathan, who had flown in from another state, was questioned but had a solid alibi. Despite this, he was visibly shaken and on the verge of a nervous breakdown, deeply concerned about Annie's disappearance. Among the suspects, one is Annie's teacher. On the day she disappeared, he canceled his lectures for unknown reasons and had no alibi. Although his was initially questioned, after the police still believed the perpetrator was likely someone from Yale University's laboratory, either a student, faculty member, or staff. A disturbing detect was found on September 12, providing the first evidence that Annie was no longer alive. A medical coat stained with blood was discovered hidden behind a false ceiling in an auxiliary room of a building. The coat did not belong to Annie, but further examination revealed that the blood on it was indeed hers. On September 13, the body Annie was found in a narrow pipeline on the technical floor of the laboratory. The day she was supposed to get married and leave for her honeymoon in Greece. Her petite stature and fragile build made it easier for her killer to stuff her body into the small space. A service dog's keen sense of smell helped the police locate Annie's body. The location where her body was hidden suggested that the killer was familiar with the laboratory's layout. It was a spot that was hard to access, making it a clever yet sinister choice for concealing the crime. Annie's body showed severe signs of trauma. Most of her ribs were broken, her limbs were damaged, and several teeth were knocked out. However, according to the pathologists, the cause of death was mechanical asphyxia, which meant that Annie was severely beaten and then strangled. A further examination revealed that Annie's clothes had traces of seminal fluid. But it was concluded that she had not been raped. A few days before Annie's body was discovered, police attention was initially drawn to Raymond J. Clark III, a young laboratory technician. Raymond claimed to have seen Annie leave the building without her belongings, implying she intended to return. However, his testimony aroused suspicion from the police. Following the discovery of Annie's body, Raymond became the primary suspect. They collected DNA samples from Raymond and asked him not to leave the country until the investigation was completed. On September 17, Raymond was arrested. Forensic examination results showed that his semen was found on Annie's clothes. And his robe, stained with Annie's blood, was discovered hidden in the suspended ceiling. Additionally, Raymond had suspicious bruises on his body, suggesting that Annie had fiercely defended herself before her death. Despite the incriminating evidence, Raymond denied any involvement in the crime. Further investigation showed that Raymond was a very hot-tempered person, easily angered and often had workplace conflicts. He frequently engaged in verbal altercations with colleagues and had a reputation for being cruel, having physically abused women he had relationships with in the past. Raymond did not excel academically, but he stood out as a promising athlete in school. He is known for his handsome looks and has a strong appeal to women. However, he was unable to get into university due to poor grades. Fortunately, with the help of some relatives, Raymond secured a job at a laboratory, starting as a janitor and eventually working his way up to become a technician. During this time, Raymond was in a relationship with a woman named Jessica Del Rocco. However, Their relationship was tumultuous, and Jessica later testified against Raymond in court. She described him as controlling, stating that he would constantly monitor her activities, read her messages, and dictate what she could do and couldn't do. He would also become violent when they disagreed. And Jessica claimed that he would physically abuse her. After one particularly brutal incident, Jessica fled from Raymond. She temporarily relocated to another state to escape his abuse. Then Raymond had been in a relationship with Jennifer Radko, a Yale University student, for the past year. Jennifer ignored rumors about his alleged infidelity with students and lab employees. She accepted his marriage proposal, and they proceeding with wedding preparations. The motive behind the murder remains unclear, even after he fully admitted his guilt. He never revealed his motive, even after admitting to the crime. Initially, it was thought that the murder was related to a workplace conflict. Annie was conducting experiments on laboratory mice to study the effectiveness of enzymes in treating cancer, diabetes, and other diseases. Raymond, who considered the laboratory his domain, was in charge of the mice. Two theories emerged about the incident leading to the murder. The first theory suggests that Raymond might have had a conflict with Annie. On the day of the murder, Annie stayed late in the laboratory and entered the area where experimental animals were kept. Raymond, who had cleaned the area, go in there too. The confrontation could have intensified into a physical altercation, which in turn could have led to Annie being strangled by their Raymond a fit of rage. A second theory proposes that Raymond had feelings for Annie, but she rejected his advances. Raymond, unaccustomed to rejection, was hurt by her refusal. When he learned about her upcoming wedding on September 7th, Raymond was completely overcome by intense feelings of jealousy. The next day, when he was alone with Annie in the laboratory, he attacked her, beating and attempting to rape her, then ultimately strangling her. This theory explains the appearance of seminal fluid on Annie's clothes. The case gained widespread media attention from the start. The victim was a promising young scientist, and the crime was committed on campus. Raymond first appeared in court in Connecticut on October 6, 2009, where he denied any involvement in the murder and the charges against him. The hearing was postponed multiple times to allow for the collection of all evidence and materials. It was discovered that Raymond had spent at least an hour with Annie in the laboratory, during which the murder took place. In an attempt to mislead investigators, Raymond used his key card over 50 times at various locations, eventually making his way to the technical floor. There, he spent around 15 minutes hiding the body in the wall. Raymond then activated the fire alarm, which forced the staff to evacuate the building, providing him with an opportunity to blend in and avoid suspicion. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered in the pocket of a robe found hidden under a false ceiling, a green ballpoint pen. Further examination revealed that Raymond had used this pen to sign his name in various work logs on the same day. Additionally, witnesses reported seeing Raymond scrubbing specific areas of the lab floor repeatedly over the next few days. Despite the floor appearing clean, he also disposed of the cleaning equipment and a pack of tissues with small brown stains, resembling blood splatters, in a trash can. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the tissues contained Annie's blood, indicating that Raymond had made a thorough attempt to eliminate any evidence. In February 2011, Clark agreed to a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. At the court hearing on March 17, 2011, he pleaded guilty to murder and attempted rape and apologized to Tanny's parents and fiancé. However, Raymond never revealed the details of the incident leading up to the murder or his motivation for the crime. As a result, he was sentenced to 44 years in prison. Raymond is currently serving his sentence at the Cheshire Correctional Institution in New Haven County, Connecticut, and will not be eligible for release until September 2053. The parents and fiancé of Annie have expressed that they find the given sentence to be fair. At the sentencing, Annie's mother, delivered a heartfelt speech. With tears in her eyes, she expressed that she would never get the opportunity to hold her daughter again, witness her marriage, hear her laughter, or enjoy the presence of her grandchildren. She said goodbye to her child, whom she cherished as the greatest gift from God. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Claire Bernal. Claire Bernal was born on August 18, 1983, in Groombridge, a small village on the border of Kent and East Sussex, England. She spent most of her childhood and teenage years there. Little is known about her parents. Claire was raised by her mother, Tricia Bernal. Her father, from whom her mother is divorced, was uninterested in Claire's upbringing and did not participate in her life. Claire was a sociable, cheerful, and open-minded girl. She attended St. Gregory's Catholic School, where she excelled academically, participated in dance, and developed a passion for fine arts. Later, she enrolled at Kent College, where she earned a bachelor's degree in science. Claire was a friendly and outgoing woman who easily became the center of attention in any group. She had many friends, and people always spoke highly of her. Despite her sociable nature, she was cautious and careful, avoiding bad habits and choosing her friends wisely. During her college years, she worked part-time as a makeup artist. This experience inspired her to pursue a career in the beauty industry. She completed specialized courses in cosmetology and makeup artistry, as well as learning the fundamentals of theatrical makeup. These skills led her to her dream job as a beauty and style consultant at the upscale store Knightsbridge, which had recently opened in the luxury department store Harvey Nichols. To take this job, Claire moved to London, because rent in the capital was quite high, so she lived with two friends. Despite being new to the industry, Claire quickly became a favorite with her colleagues. She was the most knowledgeable about makeup and skin care, so she took the time to mentor newbies. Claire describes herself as detail-oriented, patient, friendly, and kind. Claire loves living in the capital, where there are many opportunities to showcase her talents, learn new skills, and gain experience. During her first few months at Harvey Nichols, Claire met Michael Peake, a senior security guard who was immediately drawn to her. He showed his interest through various gestures and was good-looking. However, Michael has a complicated past. He is a citizen of both the Czech Republic and Slovakia. He was a former soldier who deserted and moved to England to avoid military service. Michael has a wife, whom he is in the process of divorcing, and a young child. Michael speaks with a very strong regional accent. He is tall and athletic, smiling and joking frequently. Michael began pursuing Claire. For about a month, they chatted happily and interacted mainly at the department store where they worked. When Michael asked Claire out on a date, she happily agreed. Their first date was at a quaint London cafe, where they spent the evening talking about their lives and sharing personal stories. During the conversation, Michael revealed that he was married but expressed his intention to divorce his wife soon because he wanted to be with Claire forever. This unexpected confession made Claire feel a little uncomfortable, but she thought that he was probably just joking. When Claire shared everything with her mother, she felt unhappy that the person pursuing her daughter was a foreigner, 8 years older than her and already had a family. Claire's mother Tricia advised her daughter not to meet this man. However, Claire felt safe and reassured her mother that everything was fine. On the second date, Michael took Claire to an amusement park, gave her a beautiful bouquet of flowers, complimented her repeatedly, kissed her goodbye and confessed his love. Claire was surprised and wondered if Michael was joking. That evening, she called her mother to express her concerns. Once again, her mother asked her to stop seeing him. Claire admitted that his behavior was a bit strange, but she admitted that she liked Michael and wanted to get to know him. So Michael asked her out on another date a week later, which she agreed to. This time Michael confessed his love again and told Claire that he would never let her go again. This left Claire confused, and even a little scared. She decided that this would be their last date and that she would end the relationship. Their short-lived affair lasted less than a month, during which they only went out 3 times. However, that was enough for Michael to believe that Claire was now his. Michael went back to the Czech Republic for a few weeks to see his wife and settle their divorce, but he was unable to resolve the issue. During this time, Claire almost completely stopped thinking about him, moving on with her life, believing that Michael was part of her past. However, one evening, he called her, asking to meet him at the airport. When Claire refused, he insisted that he needed her help. Claire finally agreed to meet him and even offered to let him stay for a day, since he had mentioned that he had moved out of his rented apartment and could not move into his new one until the next day. After entering Claire's house, Michael said that he wanted to stay and live with her. Claire was scared and asked him to leave immediately. However, Michael refused. Claire threatened to call the police if Michael did not leave. Although he eventually left the apartment, he did not leave and remained sitting on the doorstep until morning. The next day at work, Claire explains to Michael that their relationship is over and that their previous 3 dates meant nothing. However, Michael disagrees. Michael continued to prove his true feelings. He brought a large bouquet of red roses to Claire's workplace, but she refused to accept them. Michael persisted and took Claire home later, where he sat outside her apartment all night. When the neighbor tried to kick him out, Michael threatened to harm Claire instead of breaking up with her. Michael's actions and behavior are a desire to control Claire, despite Michael's assertions of love. Claire calmly explains that she has no feelings for him and regrets their short-lived relationship, to which Michael responds by hugging her tightly. He whispers in her ear, insisting that she loves him but does not yet realize it. For 6 months, Claire endured relentless stalking and harassment from Michael. Despite reporting her to the police, no action was taken. At work, Michael lurked outside her store, monitoring Claire's every move and contacting her dozens of times a day via phone calls and text messages. Michael would confess his undying love, beg for forgiveness, and beg her to come back. However, when his attempts were rebuffed, he would resort to threats, insisting that they would eventually be together. Every time Claire changed her phone number, Michael would find a way to get her number within a few days. What scared her the most was that Michael knew her home address and was always outside her house. Even when she tried to move, Michael followed her and found out her new address, causing the harassment to continue. Michael thought they were still in love. He even counted the months since they first met. In Michael's messages to Claire, he mentioned that if Claire didn't belong to him, he would make sure that no one else could have her. Claire had difficulty concentrating at work and was afraid to go out in public. Even the sound of the phone ringing startled her. Over time, the situation got worse and Claire began having nightmares at night. The emotional damage was evident as she lost a significant amount of weight. She felt tired and lost her confidence and her usual outgoing demeanor. Encouraged by her mother, friends, and co-workers, Claire finally decided to report her situation to her employer. She confided in the head of security at the mall. This man, who had experience in law enforcement, took Claire's concerns seriously and conducted a thorough investigation. He interviewed other employees and carefully reviewed the mall's surveillance footage, gathering evidence that showed that Claire was indeed being stalked by Michael. The security manager transferred Michael to another part of the store. However, this change did not significantly improve the situation. Michael continued to spend most of his time waiting outside the store, monitoring Claire's actions. Because Michael failed to perform his duties, the store management had to fire him. Despite this, Michael continued to harass Claire. Claire decided to report Michael to the police. When questioned by the police, Michael denied any wrongdoing, claiming that his intentions were sincere and that he only wanted to make it up to Claire so they could get back together. He insisted he had not threatened Claire, but his tone could have been misinterpreted. However, the police did not speak to Claire's colleagues and flatmates, who witnessed the incident and knew Michael had been stalking Claire for months and repeatedly threatening to kill her. The police treated the situation as a casual affair, finding no threat to Claire's life or health. The police did not conduct a risk assessment and Michael was only given a fine and a warning. He was also banned from the shopping center where she worked and ordered to stay away from her. A day after being questioned and notified of the ban on approaching Claire, Michael was back at her house, peering through the windows. When Claire saw him, she called the police. However, by the time the officers arrived, Michael had left the scene and they took no action against him. Claire continued to report her harassment by Michael to the police on June 10, 2005, saying that he had violated the no-contact order. However, when the police arrived, Michael was gone and no action was taken against him. Michael was eventually arrested. He cooperated with the police, surrendered calmly, and was handcuffed without resistance. After his arrest, he was charged with stalking and harassment. Michael spent a week in jail before being released on bail. The trial was scheduled for August 31, 2005, but before the trial, Claire decided to go on vacation. She went to a famous Italian resort with her mother and a friend, where they spent time enjoying the warm sea. The holiday was over. When she returned to London, she was surprised to find that Michael had stopped following her. He had disappeared. Feeling extremely relieved, she let down her guard. Michael returned to his hometown, where he spent every day at the shooting range, honing his shooting skills. He underwent training and obtained a license to purchase a pistol. Michael then brought the weapon into the UK with him and avoided all contact with Claire before their scheduled court hearing. During the hearing, he remained calm, pleading guilty and apologizing, claiming that he had no intention of causing harm. As a result, Michael was released again, without facing any real punishment. The next 2 weeks passed in silence, with Claire thinking that Michael would not bother her again. On September 13, 2005, Claire had a date with her new boyfriend that evening. She was in a good mood, chatting happily with a coworker, telling her about her plans when she heard a strange sound in the store from the entrance. Michael had been working as a security guard here for a long time, so he entered the building without being detected. Claire noticed something was wrong with her friend's expression, but before she could react, a shot was fired. Michael shot Claire point-blank in the back of the head, then fired 3 more bullets into her face as she fell to the floor. The gunshots caused widespread panic in the store, with people screaming, running, and looking for cover. Thinking that the shooter would come out of the lobby and start shooting randomly at customers, everyone prepared for the worst. Instead, Michael fired another shot into the ceiling, then pressed the barrel of the gun to his temple and pulled the trigger, instantly ending his life. Michael has been stalking Claire for almost a year, making her life miserable, and now he has brutally ended it. Michael has fulfilled his dark promise and cannot bear the thought of living without her. When paramedics and police arrived on the scene, they found the aftermath of that evening was devastating. Claire's mother, Tricia Bernal, had attended her sister's birthday party and returned home late. When she met police at the front door, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. She was told that her daughter Claire had been shot and killed. Tricia Bernal was shocked when she heard the news. Michael had asked a law student working at the department store about the potential punishment for the crime a few months earlier, which was then known to colleagues, including Claire. Claire reported her concerns to the police, fearing for her life, but no action was taken. The crime was largely due to police negligence, despite Claire's repeated pleas for help. Michael was arrested twice but released on bail, breaching a no-contact order, threatening Claire and consulting a lawyer about the punishment. However, the police felt this was not enough to jail him. He had the opportunity to leave the country, buy a weapon and return to commit the murder. There was crucial evidence, testimony from co-workers, roommates, and others who had heard Michael's threats against Claire, but this evidence was ignored by the police. It was only when Michael killed Claire and then committed suicide that the police realized the severity of the situation and the countless mistakes that had occurred. Claire's mother Tricia decided not to let this go and to seek justice. She joined forces with other grieving families who had lost loved ones in similar circumstances. Together, they launched a national program to help victims of stalking. As a result of their efforts, the law was changed and stalking was reclassified as a criminal offense. In 2012, a new law was passed that banned stalking completely. A helpline was also set up for victims who did not receive adequate support and protection from the police. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jordan Worth. Alex Skeel was born on August 17, 1995 in Kingston upon Hull, into a warm and wealthy family. Alex Skeel also has a twin brother. The twins' health was not good when they were young because they were born prematurely. Despite these health challenges, Alex's intellectual development was not affected, and he was just like his peers. He was even able to actively participate in school sports. From a young age, his parents showered both sons with love and care, investing heavily in their education to give them a better life. After completing high school, both brothers enrolled at the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alex is smart, physically attractive, and healthy thanks to his regular visits to the gym. He is quite shy, so he is hesitant to ask women out. In college, Alex met Jordan Worth, a young woman from a wealthy family. Jordan was very popular at college because of her fashion sense. At that time, many boys wanted to compete for her attention. Jordan also spends time volunteering, focusing on fundraising, organizing aid for local animal shelters, and helping children in Africa facing famine. Her charitable efforts are contributions to a better world. Alex Skeel fell for Jordan immediately, drawn to her kindness, intelligence, and beauty. Although he thought someone so famous and talented would never notice him, Alex was surprised when Jordan took the initiative to get to know him. They began dating in 2012, when they were both 17. Jordan and Alex, they were called the cutest couple in college. The early stages of their relationship were filled with love, respect, and care for each other. They often showered each other with sweet gestures and exchanged gifts on important milestones. They were often seen smiling and hugging in photos, accompanied by heartfelt messages and declarations of love. To those around them, it seemed like they were destined to be together and begin their journey of lifelong happiness. Jordan and Alex quickly decided to move in together. As students, they relied heavily on the financial support of their parents, who accepted the couple's relationship. Alex's parents even liked Jordan, considering her a responsible and serious girl. Jordan planned to become a history teacher. She had a very good impression on those around her. However, over time, Jordan's behavior began to change. She became more and more controlling of Alex, and the situation got worse. Alex felt pressured to report her every move to Jordan. Jordan checked his personal correspondence, including his phone, emails, and social media, without hesitation. She often exploded in fits of jealousy, but Alex, being in love, tried to ignore this behavior. When Jordan began to choose his clothes, forcing him to wear only what she picked. Over time, Jordan continues to limit Alex's social life. She decides who he can and cannot spend time with, and when, ultimately controlling who he meets. As Alex's relationship with Jordan continued, connections with those around him began to break down. His family and childhood friends were cut off from him, but he seemed oblivious to the situation. Despite their seemingly perfect public image, Jordan was controlling Alex's interactions, deleting his phone contacts without his knowledge and blocking his loved ones. She also responded to messages on his behalf, often being rude and insulting. Jordan would delete chat histories, leaving Alex unaware of what he had said to others. As a result, people began to distance themselves from him. Alex's twin brother noticed that Jordan was preventing them from communicating with Alex. At the same time, their parents also noticed changes in Alex's behavior, causing them to become concerned. Alex began to pull away from his family and those close to him. He stopped visiting, even on holidays. When his mother tried to reach out, she was met with rudeness. On the rare occasions she managed to speak with him, she urged Alex to end his relationship, warning that it would not end well. However, Alex refused to listen and defended Jordan, insisting she cared for him and meant no harm. The family soon discovered that Alex's girlfriend was behaving in a controlling manner. Jordan had convinced him to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. She then controlled his income, spending it on herself and entertainment. Concerned about Alex, his parents tried to intervene and convince Alex to leave Jordan, but he refused to listen to their concerns. In 2013, during Jordan's 18th birthday celebration at a country hotel, Jordan's behavior became alarming. As night fell and the guests began to leave, she disappeared without a word. Alex frantically searched for her, and the next morning Jordan stumbled back to their room, heavily intoxicated. When Alex asked where she had been, Jordan attacked him with aggressive actions and words. 2 months later, at Alex's 18th birthday party, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. Jordan assaulted a 15-year-old neighbor girl who was an acquaintance of Alex's family and had been invited to the party. Jordan saw the woman's intimate behavior with Alex, and Jordan became angry and attacked the girl by pulling her hair and scratching her face. Although Jordan eventually calmed down, the incident exposed her true nature to everyone present. Alex's parents and brother advised him to end the relationship because of Jordan's aggressive and unreasonable behavior. Alex took their advice for the first time and admitted that Jordan had overreacted. Alex spoke to Jordan that night, telling her that he had decided not to move back into their apartment and would instead live with his parents. After the breakup, Alex continued his studies and continued working, gradually losing contact with Jordan. On New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised Alex by calling to tell her she was pregnant. Alex was surprised and delighted. Jordan apologized for not sharing the news sooner, fearing that he would no longer want to see her. When Alex's parents learned that they were expecting a grandchild, they invited Jordan to move in with them. Jordan accepted their offer and moved in with them. Jordan and Alex eventually got married, and 3 months later, they welcomed a son named William. The young family was initially filled with happiness and contentment. For a short time, Jordan tried her best to please Alex and rekindle the flame of their love. However, when William, their son, was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. As the due date approached, Jordan became increasingly irritable and demanding, insisting that they move out of his parents' house immediately. Attributing her behavior to hormonal changes, Alex finally gave in and rented a place for them in the city. In the summer of 2015, Alex and his wife Jordan welcomed their second child, a daughter named Alice. Alex was overjoyed and felt grateful for his family. However, after the move, Jordan's behavior changed and her controlling nature resurfaced. She forbade Alex from communicating with his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Despite this, she continued to accept financial help from them and would occasionally even ask Alex to request money from his parents. Within a few months of marriage, Jordan psychologically manipulated and dominated her husband, stripping him of his autonomy and subjecting him to her complete control. She frequently belittled and insulted him, gradually escalating the abuse. The situation began when they were renovating their house, and Jordan became increasingly dissatisfied with Alex's efforts. One day, Jordan became angry after Alex expressed his frustration. In a fit of rage, Jordan threw a hammer at Alex's head, causing a deep gash. As Alex clutched his wound in shock and struggled to stay conscious, he begged Jordan for help or to call an ambulance. However, Jordan responded with indifference, telling him to crawl away and die. Jordan then left Alex without help, going into another room to watch television. The next 3 years of Alex's life were marked by non-stop moral and physical suffering. Despite this, his deep-seated depression numbed him to the escalating threats and abuse he faced. He continued working to provide for his family, but his frustration and discontent with his wife grew. Alex endured humiliation at home, being forced to sleep on the floor without a bed, blanket, or pillow, and no longer allowed access to the kitchen. He was forced to eat leftovers, often leaving him hungry, as Jordan controlled his finances, taking all his money, preventing him from buying anything outside the house. Jordan also disrupted Alex's sleep. Whenever Alex fell asleep, she would brutally attack him, hitting him on the head, cutting him, or pouring boiling water on him. As a result, Alex would wake up in excruciating pain, often bleeding or burned. He would then treat and bandage his wounds with whatever he could find, while Jordan calmly returned to bed. Over time, Alex grew numb to this abuse, eventually losing the will to resist. Alex is facing a brutal life, but neighbors and acquaintances believe the couple had a happy marriage. Jordan presented a perfect image on social media by posting old photos with captions expressing her love for her husband and how lucky she was to have found each other. However, the shocking reality is that she violently attacked Alex, knocked out his teeth and cut his arm with a knife, leaving deep wounds. Furthermore, Alex suffered severe burns and was unable to seek medical help, forced to treat his injuries with makeshift items such as plastic wrap and adhesive tape at home. The couple's neighbors frequently heard screams coming from the house, prompting some to call the police out of concern. However, whenever this happened, Jordan would convince the officers that everything was fine and they would leave. During a subsequent police visit, one of the officers noticed that the husband, Alex, had a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. He also appeared malnourished and had various bruises on his face. When Jordan tried to explain that her husband had mental health issues and sometimes harmed himself, the officer was unconvinced. Instead, they called paramedics, and Alex was taken to the hospital. The doctors were extremely worried about Alex's condition when he was admitted to the hospital. He was almost lifeless, and the severity of the injuries, especially on his arms, Alex's body was severely burned, with second and third-degree burns covering significant areas. His physical condition was extremely weak. Further examination revealed that the ligaments in Alex's shoulder were severely damaged, possibly due to repeated beatings. There was also a deep gash on his forearm, and the doctor found that Alex had lost several teeth and had multiple hematomas. At that moment, Jordan rushed into the hospital, insisting on Alex being discharged and emphasizing that she was responsible for Alex's health. Although Jordan insisted that nothing unusual had happened and that these were self-inflicted injuries, her tone did not convince anyone. Therefore, it was decided that she would be taken to the police station for further questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing, maintaining Alex was self-harming. However, when Alex's parents arrived after visiting him in the hospital, Jordan's story changed. She began to describe in detail the abuse she inflicted on Alex, claiming she treated him like a dog and that he couldn't escape her. At the same time, Jordan alleged that Alex's supposed infidelity and deliberate provocation led to her violent behavior. She also stated that he was mentally ill and had a history of self-injury. Alex's parents refuted these claims, but Alex himself was initially hesitant to testify against his wife. It wasn't until after receiving medical treatment and counseling that Alex felt brave enough to share the horrific experiences he endured at home over the years. Jordan wasn't overly concerned about her upcoming trial, expecting at most an administrative penalty. However, after all the testimony was heard, the judge found 22-year-old Jordan Worth guilty of serious charges. These included deliberately causing severe bodily harm, both physical and emotional abuse, and controlling behavior. Jordan was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Not even her status as a mother of 2 young children reduced the severity of the sentence. The court's decision shocked Jordan. Jordan's children remained in the care of their father and grandparents while she served her sentence. After years of recovering from her trauma, Alex now devotes her time to helping others, especially victims of domestic violence. After serving 5 years of a 7.5-year sentence, Jordan is set to be paroled on July 4, 2023. As part of her parole, she is prohibited from contacting Alex Skeel and their children. Jordan has started a new life, is engaged to Adam Steff, and is expecting their child. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sophia McKenna. Sophia McKenna was born on March 7, 1996, in North Stonington, Connecticut. Growing up, Sophia had a happy and carefree childhood. She was a bright and energetic young girl. Sophia developed a close relationship with her siblings. They were from her mother Michelle's first marriage. When Sophia was around 6 or 7 years old, her parents went through a divorce. This event left a lasting impact on Sophia's emotional well-being, causing her significant emotional pain in the years that followed. Sophia was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a mental health condition marked by severe mood swings during her high school years. The condition affected her mood, behavior. Although Sophia received treatment, including medication and therapy, there is no cure for the condition, which posed significant challenges for both her and her family. Bipolar disorder had a profound impact on Sophia's daily life, leading to unpredictable behavior and a chaotic lifestyle. Her relationships were often unstable and those around her struggled to cope with her condition. However, in 2015, Sophia met Austin, a charismatic and optimistic person who quickly captured her heart. Sophia and Austin had a volatile relationship due to Austin's aggression and anabolic steroid use for sports. They argued frequently, sometimes leading to physical fights. Sophia's mental health struggles often contributed to these conflicts. Austin's aggression left Sophia injured several times, requiring hospitalization. When Sophia discovered Austin's affair about a month before the incident, she decided to end the relationship, but they still saw each other occasionally. Sophia persevered through her struggles and continued to progress in life. As a young woman with striking features, she worked briefly as a model for a local company's jeans advertisements, which helped fund her education. Sophia eventually graduated as a licensed massage therapist and landed a job at the Red Door, a high-end spa in a luxury hotel. It was there that she met her 20-year-old coworker, Spencer Mugford. A beach lover and keen swimmer from Florida, Spencer was hired as a sailing instructor. Spencer and Sophia developed a strong connection due to their shared interests. They started dating, but their relationship was short-lived as their families did not approve of it, mainly because they were often surrounded by trouble. Michelle, Sophia's mother, was particularly concerned about her daughter's well-being as Sophia was frequently meeting Austin, an ex-boyfriend, and drinking alcohol, which had become a regular habit. In the end, Sophia's relationship with Spencer did not work out, and they decided to remain friends. The exact reason for their breakup is unclear, but it seems Sophia may have reunited with Austin. Despite this, Sophia and Spencer continued to spend a lot of time together, both at work and outside of work. Spencer and Sophia had always been intrigued by the mysterious lighthouse and decided to visit it on the eve of Memorial Day. Their trip, however, ended in an unexplained event. On June 8, 2018, a commercial fishing vessel near the Long Island Strait made a disturbing discovery. The crew spotted something unusual in the water, and upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a corpse. The fishermen quickly alerted the Coast Guard, who then notified the police. When the police arrived, they recovered the body of a young man from the shoreline and observed unexplained bruises and abrasions on the body. The deceased was later identified as Spencer Mugford, who, along with his girlfriend, Sophia McKenna, had been reported missing just a few days earlier. To understand what led to Spencer's death, his body underwent an autopsy. The results confirmed that Spencer had drowned, and experts did not find any signs of violence or assault. However, some details from the autopsy were kept undisclosed. In the same week that Spencer and Sophia went missing, 2 other men went missing in the same area. Their bodies were later discovered. And like Spencer, they had drowned. Initially, police believed that these incidents were unfortunate accidents caused by adverse circumstances. Remarkably, despite an extensive search, Sophia McKenna's body has not been found. On the night of May 27, 2018, in the small town of Groton, Connecticut. Although the investigation is ongoing, the case remains unsolved, leaving many questions unanswered. The story revolves around Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford, who decide to hike to the New London Lighthouse, located along the Thames River in a location considered mystical by locals. Built in 1909, this historic lighthouse has become famous for claims of paranormal activity involving Ernie, the first lighthouse keeper. According to local legend, Ernie's grief led to his tragic death after he jumped from the roof of the lighthouse following a painful breakup. Since then, locals and visitors have reported many strange occurrences. Mysterious events have included doors and windows opening for no apparent, sheets falling off beds, and radios turning on for no reason. Sailors have also reported mysterious incidents, such as boats leaving the shore on their own. As a result, the lighthouse has become a place of paranormal stories. The following Saturday, Sophia's friend Austin tried to reach her, but his calls and messages went unanswered. Initially, Austin wasn't concerned, knowing Sophia often slept in late. As the hours passed with no response, he started to worry and contacted Sophia's mother, Michelle. Michelle hadn't checked her phone because her younger daughter had been playing with it since morning. When she finally checked, she found 7 missed calls from an unknown number. Michelle attempted to call the number back, only to reach Spencer's voicemail, suggesting that the calls might have been from Sophia. Michelle attempted to contact Sophia but was unsuccessful. She and Austin then began a search. Austin called nearby hospitals, while Michelle filed a report with the police about a missing person. They also reached out to Spencer's family, who were equally worried since he had missed a significant family event and was unresponsive to their calls and messages. Michelle and Austin visited Spencer's apartment but found no indication that he had recently been there. The night before, Spencer's father learned that his son had met Sophia, which made him and his wife worried about the problems Sophia was having. Spencer's mother said that her son had planned to go fishing with a friend. The last time she spoke to Spencer was at 10 p.m. when her son said goodnight to her. Realizing that something was wrong, the Spencer family also reported their son and girlfriend missing to the police around 6:30 p.m. Police began searching for Sophia and Spencer. During the search, Austin contacted the sheriff to share some information about Sophia and Spencer's whereabouts the night before. He also told the sheriff that he had seen a video that Sophia had posted on Snapchat the night before. In the video, recorded on Spencer's phone, Sophia and Spencer can be seen having fun on a boat, heading towards the lighthouse. The footage shows a young man rowing towards the lighthouse. Everything seems normal. The photo taken before the incident shows Sophia posing playfully in front of the lighthouse with a concrete barrier and a "no passing" sign in the background. However, the events that unfolded just minutes after the photo was taken remain a complete mystery. Photos and videos were posted confirming that Sophia and Spencer were indeed at the lighthouse. This information prompted the police to dispatch 20 different Coast Guard units to the area. An extensive search was conducted by the Coast Guard, firefighters, and police, including air, sea, and land searches. The police's first major discovery was Sophia's car parked on a university campus, with her cell phone found inside. That night, the Coast Guard found a T-shirt that Spencer had been wearing in the video. Police theorized that Spencer may have used the T-shirt to secure a boat to shore. The search for Spencer and Sophia continued overnight and into the next day. However, a storm soon rolled in, prompting state authorities to temporarily halt the search until new information or clues about the Sophia and Spencer. This decision came as a shock to their families and friends, who refused to give up hope. They took matters into their own hands, plastering the city with posters and flyers featuring the missing duo's pictures. They also appealed to the public for any information that might aid in the search. Despite numerous witnesses in the area at the time of their disappearance, none came forward with any information. The family's private search efforts continued for days, but yielded no answers. Sophia likely chose not to report the incident to the police because she and Spencer had recently had run-ins with the law. Just days before, Spencer had been arrested for drunk driving, and Sophia had been charged with aggressive behavior. As a result, Sophia may have decided that it would be safer to seek help from her mother rather than seek police intervention. It is also possible that Sophia was in a state of panic and was not thinking clearly at the time. Without more information about her situation, it is difficult to say for sure why she made this decision. Police tried to piece together events on May 26, 2018. Memorial Day was coming up. Sophia was not working that day, but Spencer agreed to cover a coworker's shift from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. After work, the pair planned to meet up and attend the city's Lantern Festival together. Their plan was to spend the remainder of the day together, including a visit to a local lighthouse known for paranormal activity, which they were eager to experience. However, what happened after Spencer's shift is unclear. There is no information on who they met or where they went, and it is unknown if they had been drinking. It is known that Sophia's car was parked on a University of Connecticut campus around 2 a.m. Sophia left her cell phone in the car, possibly due to forgetfulness. Sophia's phone was dead, so she decided to leave it behind. Spencer and Sophia took a small sailboat from campus. The boat had no motor and weighed only 14 pounds, with oars as the only means of propulsion, and headed towards the lighthouse, navigating through treacherous rocky shores without safety equipment. That was all the information police had that night. On Monday evening, a police search helicopter spotted a white and blue sailboat stuck in the rocks about 7 miles west of the lighthouse. The boat was covered in dust, indicating it had been there for some time. Although it has not been confirmed, police believe the sailboat may be the one Spencer and Sophia took from campus. Fingerprints found at the scene of the boat were never examined or disclosed to the public, making it impossible to determine if they matched the fingerprints of the missing young couple, Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. A major obstacle in the investigation was the unavailability of certain key evidence. Spencer's phone was never recovered, and the police did not obtain his cell operator records, making it impossible to confirm if any calls were made to numbers other than Michelle's on the night of the disappearance. Both the lighthouse and the campus have security cameras, but unfortunately they were not working on the night of the disappearance, and therefore did not capture any video of the event. Additionally, a serious mistake was made by the police in not investigating the lighthouse immediately after the couple went missing. To keep the case in the public eye, Sophia McKenna's family created a Facebook page called Searching for Sophia McKenna in July 2018. The page allowed the family to share updates, brochures, and pleas for information with the public. In a strange turn of events, a suspicious message was sent to Michelle from Sophia's social media account, requesting money, just weeks after the disappearance. This raised concerns about potential hacking, as the police had possession of Sophia's phone at the time. The investigation into Sophia's disappearance and Spencer's death has been closed. Police have been unable to come to a clear conclusion about what happened. On July 10th, a memorial service was held in Sophia's honor, organized by her family and friends.